In the Wurail kingdom, a kid in a sharp modern business suit stumbles into a massive throne room, totally lost. Then the word hero hits him like a drumbeat, and he's horrified because he feels completely unworthy. The stern-faced king is shoved into view, veiled in authority, and with a thunderous decree he confirms the truth. Yes, you're the hero from another world. He blurts out what any of this means as a hooded mage drops to one knee in front of him, and the guy's jaw hits the floor when the mage's crystal-topped staff snaps to life, as if it just proved he's the real deal. He blurts out asking if he's got any special gift. Then the king steps in and says, "No classic hero skills turned up, but you do have 3 powers. Hero's growth, omnilingualism, and the ability to adapt to any environment." Revelation snaps the other mages into full panic, screaming that the summoning somehow went wrong. How could it work, then go bad? One mage rushes to the king and says there's no undoing it, and when the king demands what comes next, the mage answers with a brutal order. "Behead him." The young man gets smashed by the blow, his face contorting in pure terror as the mage's voice booms through the air, calling the useless hero beyond saving and ordering his execution. The king snaps his arms wide, rage bursting out of him as he bellows. 15 years since the last summoning, and now another 15 will be needed before they can try again. Still burning with rage, he snarls about why they dragged in someone so useless. Then a mage tries to soothe him, and the king's face crumples with despair, panicking that they can't survive on their own and replaying the ritual in his head, desperate to find what went wrong. He bellows at the hooded figures to stop, snarling that they shouldn't come anywhere near him with that worthless bloodline. His rage hits the mages like a punch, and they freeze, shell-shocked. When the king's decree hits, the summoned man frantically begs him to wait, swearing he'll do anything he can. Yet the king just stares him down, icy and unimpressed, saying a useless man has no role at all. As the king pivots away, a minister strides in and bows low. The monarch snaps what he's thinking, and the minister answers with a bold proposal, something tied to summoning the man. It hints that in a far-off spot like a lumber mill, nobody would even bat an eye if the hero vanished. And then a cold, cruel grin stretches across his face as he talks. So they cooked up a full-on deception. Everyone was told the hero's summoning finally worked, while the real guy got shoved away for training, popping out only for ceremonies. Meanwhile, a decoy hero was quietly forged in the dark. And just like that, the true summoned man was tossed aside, and 15 brutal years slipped by. Now he's dropped into a roaring, bustling forge, when one smith leans in and says the next hero's summoning is right around the corner, and another follows up with the gut punch that their time together is almost over. He grins warmly and rubs the back of his head, thinking how their guidance for the last 15 years finally taught him to build all kinds of things. Nothing like the day he first showed up, when he couldn't even forge his own name. The master blacksmith cuts him down on the spot, barking that his skill belongs to him, not to anyone else's hand. He rages that all this talent is getting strangled on boring repairs instead of being forged for real. And the summoned man just stares at his hammer, swallowing the truth like fate, accepting that this is his life no matter what. He stared at his calloused hands and counted the 15 years he'd poured into the royal forge, while the kingdom treated him like nothing but a decoration. One secret buried so deep nobody ever bothered to look. His job was grime, pain, and danger wrapped into one messy, brutal work, and yet it thrilled him more than the boring desk job he'd ditched in Japan. Here, he only had to show up during daylight. 15 years ago, he remembered the rejection. Nobody wanted him. But he kept pouring his heart into his craft, even if it was only forging one lonely nail, and somehow that dedication built him a life. He turned to the other blacksmiths he'd fought alongside for years and poured out his heartfelt gratitude. Since the moment he got summoned into this world, he couldn't stop replaying his journey, grinding hardships, wild moments, and the kind of companionship that made his life feel way more complete than he ever expected. Meanwhile, inside the royal castle, the day everyone waited for finally crashed into reality. After 15 long years, the hero's summoning ritual was about to kick off. Inside the throne room, King Veiled III, awestruck, just as a blazing light exploded from the summoning circle and the entire court erupted into cheers. The summoning worked. The lights dimmed, and there they were, 3 stunned strangers. A knight in shining armor strode into view and greeted them, welcoming them to the kingdom of Wurail. He introduced himself as Haiji, the former hero. Then one of the newcomers, a woman in a business suit, announced her name. Indu Kanai, and the crowd erupted as everyone confirmed the real bombshell. They'd summoned both a hero and a magic user. She fidgets and insists they have to scramble for the ceremony, present the hero to the public, before anything slips. The king nods in agreement, saying that with this done, the whole country can finally breathe and find peace. Then the king snaps his gaze to the man who once wore the hero's title, promising him a fiefdom as payment for his 15 years of service. The royal minister hypes it up as a stunning, peaceful land where he can finally rest and mend every wound. Yet the man only stays silent because he realizes he never once actually stepped onto a battlefield. He drops to his knees before the throne, lowers his head, and gratefully snatches the king's offer like it's his lifeline. Once he takes his new post, he steps outside the castle walls, and there it is, a carriage waiting right for him. He spins around from the forge, thanking his crew with real heart, and they wave him off with big smiles, telling him to come back and visit anytime he can. With the carriage jolting forward, he grabs his seat and braces for the ride. Then lets out a quiet laugh at the wild fact that he's 40 now, wondering what his new lands are going to look like. The moment crashes down on him, and the tears start pouring as if his chest can't hold it anymore. He hates that he's crying, just wants to slip somewhere quiet and disappear. His carriage rumbles onward through the countryside, and as he gazes out, he admits that those 15 years inside the palace were non-stop, but never quite the life of a hero. Still, he's convinced the new man they've brought in, Joji Sagami, will crush in and make the kingdom stronger. After 20 grueling days away from the royal capital, he finally rolled in. Then the carriage driver pointed him to a nearby hill, saying he could spot his whole new domain from the top. The former hero thanked him, winced through the ache in his back, and stepped out of the carriage. He stood on the hilltop, letting the wind batter his coat as he stared out at the world below, and pure disbelief hit him like a punch when he finally took it all in. "So it's really here," he whispered, while the driver watched in silence. Before him, a sea of trees stretched forever, and he blurted out, "Is this really all mine now?" The truth hit like a wave, pure disbelief crashing through him as he kept asking if this was truly where he'd been dropped. He couldn't shake the thought that this dead land might have 0 villages and 0 people, so he had no choice but to push into the woods and find out for himself, and the deeper he went, the more he spotted a tiny, run-down hut. He tiptoed into the tiny building, and the moment he stepped inside, dust and neglect hit him like a punch. This place had been abandoned for ages, but with a little cleaning, that plain bed frame could still be brought back to life. He swept his eyes across the main room, spotting a tiny structure beyond the doorway, and he couldn't help wondering if it was a shed, because this plain little place looked like it was his entire new home. His gaze snapped to a heavy stone hearth inside the hut, and it hit him. This wasn't some random thing, it was royal provisioning, probably sent by a king. Maybe he wasn't as bad as the rumors made him sound. Trapped inside a strange, overgrown ruin, the armored hero scans his surroundings and hunts for his next play. First, water, only to find nothing, not a river, not a well, not even a hint of one nearby. After testing his newfound powers, he throws his gauntlet forward and shouts a spell. Then a glowing sphere of pure water erupts above his palm, shimmering with raw magic. Water roars into the wooden bucket until it's overflowing, and relief hits him hard. He's genuinely grateful that beginner magic can actually do something this useful. Now that his thirst is gone, he can't stop thinking about his next problem, getting food. He starts carving a stick into a makeshift spear, then stops dead when he realizes there's nothing edible nearby. And the idea of pushing into that crushing, dense forest feels terrifying, because building the right tools for a real hunt would take way too long. He figures that if a river is anywhere near, he can at least try to catch fish. Then, while he's stuck thinking about his mess, his eyes snag something lurking just past the ruins. A sudden breeze whips through the area, dragging a few stray leaves right across his field of vision. His eyes track every motion, and then, bam, he stumbles on something he never saw coming. A massive open field drowned in gorgeous white flowers. His eyes snap to a huge, gleaming thing sitting in the clearing, and he just freezes. Because there's no way something like this belongs in the middle of a forest, right? He stares, mouth open, trying to tell himself it might be a massive gold ingot. He closed in on the colossal golden monolith, and up close it was even more jaw-dropping. Then when he lifted his gauntlet and smacked it against the surface, surprise hit him hard. It didn't feel anything like. Suddenly the earth started to quake, and a massive golden mass slid into view with a terrifying, bone-deep rumble. A massive, leathery wing burst open with a thunderclap, and he yelped in panic at the sudden chaos. The creature finally cracked open its true form, a glorious white-scaled dragon, blazing in all its glory. It lowered its head, that huge eye locked on the fallen man. He stared right back, mind spinning, trying to figure out if this was really a dragon, and why a creature like that was here at all. The creature's voice boomed through the clearing, and it named the place, Forest of Dalida, calling it sacred ground where gods and spirits roam, then declared, loud and fearless, that it was the guardian of this land. Then it dubbed itself the cruel, holy dragon, and with a bone-chilling command, it snapped at the human to leave right now, declaring this was absolutely no place for him. Still reeling from the order, he could only stare as that massive dragon crumpled onto the bed of flowers, blotting out the whole landscape with its sheer weight. He strides right up to the great beast, shouting its name like he owns the night. Then the cruel question cuts in. What's wrong? The dragon squirms, scales too thick, moaning that its own claws can't reach the terrible itch it's desperate to scratch. He leans in and demands to know if a dragon's scales can even feel pain. Cruel just smirks and says those scales are basically armor, so they never feel pain or even an itch. A spark of understanding and grit flashes across his face. Then he orders Krull to hold on, swearing he's about to forge the tools they need. As the dragon finally drops into stillness, the hero's promise to forge new tools hangs there like a spark waiting to ignite. He swiftly sets up a rough-forged workshop in the clearing, furnace roaring, anvil ready, and a quenching trough waiting. Then gives it a sharp, satisfied nod like, perfect, now we're in business. He fires up the forge and checks the furnace. Yep, the heat's finally right, and with this setup locked in, he knows he can hammer out what he needs with zero trouble. Slipping a blacksmith's apron over his tunic, he raises the hammer high, and with that, the preparations he'd been whispering to himself are finally done. He clenches down with relentless focus and slams the hammer onto the glowing metal. Boom, sparks explode, and the forest rings with that sharp, sizzling sound of steel taking shape. He battered the forge all day, and every hammer clang on molten metal thumped through the workshop, while he gripped the fiery piece with tongs and drove sharp, perfect hits to forge it into shape. The brutal heat made sweat bead on his brow, so he wiped it off in one quick motion, then snapped back to work, refusing to lose focus. With the shaping done, he slammed the scorching metal into a trough of water, then watched the steam roar up as the heat vanished instantly. He exhaled and braced for the grind, still waiting, counting it out in his head. He'd need 8 or 10 more of those items. All right, one down, he told himself. Now lock in, focus, and go. While he was slaving away, the one he worked for finally started to move, something huge, reptilian, and terrifying. Then the mask of silence cracked as a cruel voice snapped. Wake up, Cruel. The great dragon, fully awake at last, stared at its own body in total bewilderment. What were these huge metal staples, pinning its scales together? It stared harder, certain this wasn't building gear or any medical tool it had ever known. Then the gay guys pounced on the human standing there, human. The dragon rumbled, so you're back. And the hero shot back, relieved, yeah, good, you're awake. The dragon reeled at the fresh sensations, and suddenly it understood. That awful itch was gone, and the pain was gone too. The hero hauled out a massive wooden tub packed with food and told the dragon, eat up, boost that blood. He pointed out that spinach builds blood and hits you with a solid dose of iron, and the dragon looked genuinely impressed that this human could manage something so tough. This is a small price, the hero urged, leaning in, so please eat even a little. He leans in as the holy dragon crushes its huge meal, then asks, so how is it? From the nearly empty basin, a thought snaps back, pure, happy satisfaction. It's delicious. The man exhales and smiles, finally relieved. He laughs with pure joy, urging the dragon to chow down and rest, then swears that if this is what it loves, he'll keep feeding it until it's full. While the massive beast watches, caught in his quiet focus on one simple thing. A human's kindness. That night, for the first time, the man finally sank into peaceful sleep beside the massive dragon, and both of them lay beneath a canopy of stars. Next morning, he jolts awake in a sea of white flowers, shocked he slept through the entire night. Then he sits up and sees a mysterious figure looming right over him. A horned young woman leans in and asks if he's awake. He jerks up, stunned, and demands who she is and how she dares to call him human. Then his mind races as he wonders if she's been watching him all night, since she knows the name she uses, Haiji, the one the soldiers kept calling out. She just nods and says his name, and suddenly it hits. You're Haji, leaving him staring up at her, utterly lost and still in shock. She gushes that he's amazing for bandaging a wound with iron, then flashes a small, sly smile and tells him her name, Cruel, and it hits him like a punch in the chest as the truth clicks in his head. He locks eyes and freezes the room in stunned silence. Then she asks if he's embarrassed, before yanking her top up to show a long, stitched scar stretched across her abdomen. She says it's almost healed, but the moment he sees it, he panics and blurts for her to cover herself up. He sank to the water's edge, still trying to wrap his head around it all, while Cruel stood there, breathing out with relief and praising his own strength for bringing him through. Then she leaned in and called to him, saying she had a request, and he snapped his head toward her, confused, repeating it like, "A request is." His eyes went wide with pure disbelief, sweat sliding down his temple as he stammered. And when she leaned in with a bright, flushed intensity, Cruel said she wanted iron, and she wanted him to take her as his disciple. Above the vast canopy of the forest of gods and spirits, Daltia, the sky spread wide. And that's exactly where the hero and the holy dragon, Cruel, collided in their fateful encounter. In the royal dining hall, the meal is already heating up. One ringed hand dives into an ornate plate like it owns the place. Shiner, now king, took the head seat at a long table and hid his secrets behind a veil. While his minister poured him a drink, Shiner admitted that he doubted Kane at first, but now he's convinced. The new hero, Kane, is proving downright useful. He scoffed and mocked the old hero like he was just decoration, then wondered if that guy was stuck somewhere struggling, while the minister flashed a cruel grin and agreed on the spot, saying that useless former hero never stood a chance against the hero standing today. The minister keeps smirking, convinced that after 15 years away, the old hero is being torn apart by some demon. But his creepy laugh gets choked off the moment the hall doors slam open. An armored knight stumbles in, shouting that he needs an audience. A sudden intrusion slams into the room, and both the king and his minister jump in shock. 3 wild shouts rip from the king as the knight, Haiji, drops to one knee, fighting for breath while he delivers the blow that crushes them. The Warrior Knight Brigade has been wiped out completely. The king roars that his unbeatable knights somehow got wrecked, and the minister can't even blink. Haiji finally steps in and explains the brutal truth. Their weapons crumbled like paper, useless against their enemy. One by one, the whole royal court freezes into stunned silence. Meanwhile, inside a cozy, vine-clad cottage, everything feels way more peaceful. Cruel, still in her human form, can't stop grinning as she wanders around what she's decided is Haiji's home. She pokes and pries at everything, and Haiji, now dressed like a normal civilian, just watches her with a quiet patience. Then she turns playful and teases him for talking to a young maiden like her in such a casual way. She shuts her eyes with a soft, teasing smile. And right then, Haiji freezes when she casually drops the bomb that she's 170 years old, insisting it's still young for a dragon, leaving him completely speechless. With a grim face, she snaps that the demon tribe is to blame for every last injury, then bears a stitched scar right along her side. "They're after the divine beast Delata," she says, voice sharp. "Hey, gee, see this wound. Ask me how I got it." She darts her eyes away, cheeks burning as she admits she messed up, then insists she never loses to them, while he watches, coldly calling her a brute. Rage flares in him, and she snaps back, demanding to know why he's so obsessed with turning her into his disciple when she was trying to tell him something important. Then, in a wild swing of confidence, she blurts out that yes, she really does want to be his disciple. He's stunned, asking if she's dead serious, and she grins bright as day, confirming it and saying it would be an honor to be taught by a fellow master of. She tilts her head up at him, confused but curious, and he stares down, swallowed by his own thoughts. Because the truth is, her unshakable will is exactly what keeps him grounded by his side. Once his mind is made up, he looks up, meets her smile, and says yes. Right there, he vows they'll open a blacksmith shop together. She explodes into joy, wraps him up in a fierce hug, and sobs his name in pure, grateful relief. Later in their brand new workshop, she squints at him and asks why he's building weapons. He nods, confirming it, then plants his hands on his hips like, "Yeah, I am." He tells them that since he already made weapons at his old job, he might as well craft something basic, like a kitchen knife, while she leans over a wooden crate and asks what her job is supposed to be. He whips around and tells her the real lesson. Watch, learn, and don't miss a thing. Today, she just needs to study him closely. She shoots her hand up, eager as ever, and agrees right away. She leans in, eyes locked on Haiji as he swings himself into the forge, completely locked in. Then, with a sharp exhale, he lifts that hammer high, poised to slam it into the blazing metal, his draconic eye burning bright with the heat. He finally wraps up his work, looking absolutely wrecked, then rushes to apologize to Cruel for getting lost along the way, only for her to grin like she can't believe her luck, eyes blazing with excitement as she declares it was insanely fascinating, and that she's determined to try making a kitchen knife herself next. He tells her this blade isn't a kitchen knife yet, and then he shows the next move. He dusts it with a special powder, then blasts it with heat to dry it out. Krull can't help but lean in, asking if this is finally the part where it'll be done. He tells her it's not ready yet, saying the blade in its current form doesn't have the tenacity it needs. Then Cruel stares at him, utterly confused, and demands, "What do you mean by tenacity?" He breaks it down, saying tenacity is the metal's own power to refuse to change, like it's got guts. The moment Cruel gets it, she lets out a wicked laugh and grabs the idea tight. He keeps the lesson rolling, saying that slow heating is what unlocks the blade's true edge. Then out of nowhere, he plunges the red-hot steel straight into a trough of oil, and it hisses and blasts steam into the air. Cruel snaps, "What are you doing?" And he just smiles, calmly saying, "After this, the only thing left is to polish it with the—" Once the final polish was done, he proudly raises the finished kitchen knife, declares it complete, then stares into the shining blade with a grin, practically in awe, because he swears it's beautiful. Her praise supercharges him, and he blurts out his plan. By the end of the day, he's forging 5 knives, and he tells Cruel she'll be right there helping. She's so thrilled she can barely sit still, asking if he really means it. She rockets her fist into the air and screams with pure joy, and Hoggy nods along, saying they're sticking to the plan. Forge a massive batch of knives and haul them to the nearby town to sell. They finally reach a bustling town square, where market stalls crowd the streets beneath bright strings of decorations. Still, that first burst of optimism dies fast as they sit there staring at their flawless handcrafted knives, watching customers walk right past, leaving them with 0 sales. AG scans the bustling crowd and clocks the vibe fast. Most shoppers here are young couples, and one nearby merchant just confirms it. Accessories and toys are flying off the shelves, while people are basically skipping the metal goods. That realization lights a spark in Cruel's eyes. Maybe forget the market and sell swords to mercenaries instead. Haji goes quiet for a beat, then his thoughts race straight to one thing: hammering deadly combat blades. His thoughts get ripped apart by a sudden uproar nearby. Someone has shoved a young woman straight onto the cobblestones, her wares flying everywhere. She begs to be spared, but a man yells at her to shut up, and that's when Haji's eyes snap to the chaos. He watches the merchant woman lurch up to her feet and square off with an armored brute, begging him to give back the sword he stole, saying it's a prized blade from her shop. And beside Haji, Cruel frets and pushes him to step in. The armored man shrugs off her pleas and raises the blade so everyone can see it, bragging that this royal sword is light, tough, and sharp enough to slice through a demon's hide. Then a young boy burst in with his merchant, insisting his sister must have paid a fortune for such a fine, royal-made weapon. While the arrogant swordsman held his ground, Cruel's patience snapped, and from the sidelines she hissed that she hated people like him, then turned to Haji and asked for the go-ahead to cut him down. Right before she could move, Haji pressed a steady hand on her head, his face turning dead serious as he demanded, "Wait." He watched the merchant boy lunge for his own property. Then the swordsman waded in, shoved him back, and barked insults at him, and Haji couldn't shake it. Yeah, that Wurail royal sword was legit, but you don't disrespect someone else's weapon like that. He stepped forward like a shot fired, snatching the kitchen knife up to intercept the swordsman's falling strike, and steel screamed as they collided in a blazing flash. The shock slammed through his blade and shattered it to pieces. He froze, staring at the broken hilt in his grip, and blurted in pure disbelief, "It broke a C." A crowd erupted in pure shock, blurting questions about what trick could ever beat a Wurail royal sword. Then the humiliated swordsman bolted, spitting out revenge, while a panicked Hoggy scrambled to explain that it wasn't some secret technique at all, and it definitely wasn't even a sword he'd been using. Right when he was about to continue, a young merchant woman lunged in with her hands clasped, pouring out gratitude, thanking him nonstop and calling him Sir Swordsman, which clearly made him squirm. She held up the plain blade that had just won that fight and demanded to know if he was a blacksmith. Then Hoggy snapped the truth into place. He wasn't a swordsman, and he wasn't a blacksmith at all, he was a cook. And right then, her jaw just dropped. That young merchant woman freezes, then snaps her hand to her mouth like she can't believe it. She stammers, demanding to know what kind of kitchen knife on earth this even is. Her shock flips into pure awe the moment she spots its caliber, an S-rank knife, tagged only as a kitchen knife, forged by Haji, gleaming right in front of her. He's just as confused, though. He grips the blade and studies it like it betrayed him, wondering how his own kitchen knife could possibly count as an S-rank weapon in Wurail. The ranking system there is crystal clear. 8 tiers with SS at the top, reserved for divine instruments and sacred treasures, and his work lands right one step below that legendary mark. Spotting her chance, the merchant woman blurts out, begging him to sell, then slams her offer from 16 to 20 gold coins, and you can practically see his surprise hit. Right before he can even answer, Cruel bursts in grinning, whipping out 2 more identical knives like it's a game, and the merchant woman's eyes go even wider as she blurt out, "So these are also yours." Hyrule flashes a grin and cheers that these are just as insane top-tier S-rank gear, while Hyji, stuck in the background, can only stare in silence, remembering he'd only grabbed them by pure luck. Her mind is made up. She grabs a heavy pouch of coins and clutches it tight, then boldly declares she's buying every one of the 5 knives. Her offer hits him like a truck. His brain instantly races through the currency math. 1 gold coin equals 10,000 yen, so 100 gold coins means a full million yen, and he's staring at that kind of money on his very first day in this world. In a bright town square, the armored hero and his companion, Cruel, settle into a patio table while Cruel nods off. And then a young woman walks up, standing like she's got a meeting to deliver. She beams at them, calls herself Filna Larsa, the traveling merchant, and with a warm smile says it's truly a pleasure to meet them. He shoots her a tired glance as he takes a sip from his cup, echoes her words, then flips the whole conversation and looks straight at her. Filna. She's flustered by how blunt he is, and she immediately wonders if he can really cough up 100 gold coins. Then she spots that well-worn, mended coat on him and doubts harder, blurting out an apology that if he's trying to sell something worth that much, she just can't pay. He calmly admits he has a condition for the deal, and when she hears it, shock flashes across her face. Then she agrees to listen. He's dead serious and setting his sights high. He wants an exclusive contract with her, swears he'll never sell his knives to any other merchant, and makes it clear he's hellbent on pulling her into his guild. The proposal stuns her, and a cold sweat blooms on her brow as the truth hits hard, an exclusive contract for an S-rank knife. The idea that she'd be the only seller is enough to knock the breath out of her. She clenched her nerves, stared him straight in the eye, and asked if he was really serious. Then cut him off before he could even speak, saying she had her own condition for this deal. The hero softly rubs Cruel's head while she sprawls there, totally content, and admits straight up that people trip him up. So besides Cruel, he's not looking to widen his circle one bit. Then he snaps his focus back to Fulnell and lays out the detailed steps she's gotta handle. And with a confident smile, she jumps right in, saying it's nothing, just hand it to her. She drops her gaze as he holds out a tiny, hand-drawn map and points her toward the marked spot to grab the items, and she nods in silence. Her calm yes instantly cracks into disbelief the moment he blurts out the location. And when her eyes snap wide with shock, she can't help but ask if he really lives in Dalida Forest. Felinel's jaw drops. Cruel grins and waves like it's nothing, even promising to go fetch her if she wanders off. And Felinel's eyes snap to the horned girl as her thoughts scramble to figure out what kind of beastman she is. Then she drops her true name like a thunderclap. She's a holy dragon, plain as day, and Filmel freezes, completely struck dumb. She freezes, then whips back to the hero with her hand over her mouth, stammering, "So, you're the guardian deity of the Dalida Forest." He glances aside, a thin sheen of sweat forming, and admits, "Yeah, it's a complicated story." Those words paint their home like a lone cabin, tucked deep inside an ancient forest where the trees stand tall and silent. They threw down a celebration feast. Right at the center sat a huge, freshly baked, pizza-like masterpiece, ringed by bowls packed with food and drinks. This meal felt like a full-on celebration. Hyji told the ecstatic Cruel that with a little extra cash coming in, they could finally throw down like this, and she leaned over the table, eyes blazing, unable to stop smiling at the feast in front of her. She took a huge bite, eyes lighting up with pure bliss, and yelled that it was insanely delicious. Then couldn't stop gushing that Hyji wasn't just a hero. He was also an unbelievable cook. Joy practically crackled off her as she soaked in that warm piece, ready to repay his kindness with action. She announced she'd go on a hunt for him right away as thanks. Hoggy snapped his head up, stunned, and asked what she planned to bring back with. Without a second thought, she snatched a bow off the wall, told him she was borrowing it, and then bolted out of the cabin before he could even blink, leaving him to stand there, shouting after her in pure confusion. Moments later, a thunderous roar slammed through the forest, and a hulking, dark-scaled dragon burst into view. Thinking it was his own companion, Hyji bolted out of the cabin and screamed, "You turn into a dragon." But the chaos wasn't what he expected. There was Cruel, slumped by a snapped bow, eyes wrecked with disappointment. She told him she'd spotted a boar and yanked the bow as hard as she could, only for it to snap clean in half. Hyji let out a weary sigh and promised her, "Don't cry," then reminded her she'd pushed way too hard for a normal bow. After the boar slipped away, she pressed on, only to reveal Dragon was on her heels. And as she talked, they stopped in front of a cave's pitch-black mouth, the very thing behind that earlier roar. Hyji listened, and the moment the meaning clicked, everything finally snapped into place. She lays a comforting hand on Cruel's head, telling her to trust him with everything, then she lifts her gaze, eyes wide, stunned by what she's seeing but burning with hope. Her face lights up the instant he makes the promise. An enormous, thrilled smile bursts across her, because he's going to forge a bow she can draw without it snapping in her hands. With this new mission burning in his chest, he steps into his rustic workshop and stares at the work ahead. Because sure, iron would give him strength, but that bow would end up painfully heavy. He rubs his chin, deep in thought, realizing that if that bow's too heavy, it'll throw off every shot, wrecking its whole purpose as a hunting weapon. Realizing iron won't cut it, he shuts the door on that idea and vows to find something completely different. Then he whips his gaze around, hunting for a new option. His relentless search finally pays off. He stumbles on a crate packed with unfamiliar, gleaming ingots. He pokes one and realizes it's light silver, and even though the whole site screams wrong place, wrong time, he can't ignore it. This could be the exact solution he needs. Right then, a brutal commotion outside snaps his focus. He shouts for Cruel and finds her calmly digging a giant trench with bare hands. Then she just pauses and asks, like it's nothing if he wants her to dig him a hole outside. He bolts out screaming for her to stop, and down in the monster pit she carved sits the day's dark dragon. Then Haiji grills her for her motive and suddenly hits on it, swearing he'll forge a bow right from this hole, while the dragon stares up, completely lost. He kicks off his blacksmithing lesson, breaks the first step down to Krull, then fires up the sand mold prep. Next, he unveils the second step with that big pit she dug, showing her how to shape the wooden pattern, and finally he tells her he'll use a special agent to lock the sand tight around it so it won't crumble. With fierce focus, he drops to his knees and pounds the sand into place until it hardens, gripping the wooden form like it's locked there forever. Cruel's eyes widen in amazement as she stares at the sand and blurts out, "It's set solid." Then he leans in and tells her the next move, carefully peel away the wooden pattern. As the pattern finally gets peeled away, it leaves behind a spotless mark in the sand, like the ocean itself got erased, and the first stage of the whole process is officially finished. Now it's time for the fourth step, casting. Haiji orders Cruel to lug a crucible brimming with sizzling, glowing molten metal, and she says yes on the spot. He freezes for a split second, stunned by the request he just threw at her. Then it hits him who she is, and he snaps back, telling her to dump everything straight into the hole. She snatches the searing crucible with bare hands like it's nothing, tosses out that her own flames burn hotter, and Haiji just stares in shock. Then she pours the liquid metal straight into the sand mold. After it cools, she yanks the finished metal bar free, and with that, the fifth and final step is done. Cradling the finished piece, Kuroba's surprise hits hard when she realizes it's insanely light. So light it feels unreal, and Haiji grins, telling her it's iron, just not from here. It's made with a metal from his world called aluminum, and he can't hide how thrilled he is that the whole process actually worked. She stared at the metal bar, confused by how light it felt, and HG snapped that this aluminum was tough and easy to mold, so he was planning to bend it into a bow. Once she clocked what he meant, she snapped into action, and when he gave that quiet chuckle, it was clear. Even with her insane power, flexing that special alloy was still going to be a beast. With a grunt that shook the room, she threw every ounce of strength into it, bending that metal bar until it formed a perfect curve. And when she lifted the finished bow shape up for Hagi to see, it was pure, earned victory. He shoved the finished bow into her hands and urged her to fire it up, bragging that he'd woven her own dragon scales into the design. And when she pulled the string back, the weapon flickered to life with a faint, eerie glow. Her eyes sparkled with pure delight, and she blurted out that Hagi was incredible, because that bow never cracked or buckled under her insane strength. While she basked in her brand-new weapon, Haiji's smile faded into deep worry. He replayed that Kaga incident in his head, doubting whether this bow would actually hold up. Then Cruel swung around and asked if he'd let her watch him too, and he instantly nodded ready. Their hunt kicked off for real. Huddled in hiding, they spotted their target, a hulking, giant-tusked boar. Haiji's eyes went wide in disbelief at how massive it was, like, is this actually the one? Cruel snapped back that it was, and told him to keep a close watch. She yanked the bowstring back with raw, crushing force, and the aluminum frame screamed under the strain, while Haiji's face went pale as he blurted a frantic warning that she was pulling way too hard. With a sharp twang, Cruel snaps the bowstring loose, eyes blazing with focus, as her arrow tears through the forest, and the bow itself strains at the edge, barely holding together under that crushing pull. The arrow hits dead center, whoosh, slamming into the giant boar with explosive force, a blazing burst of light ripping open on impact and blasting the nearby foliage into the air. She whips around to him, eyes sparkling as she blurts out how insanely amazing his bow is. while Haiji, still stuck in dumbfounded awe, can only sputter that the real magic is in her. Cruel swears the demon was brought down by the bow's insane power, insisting no normal person could fell something like that with one shot, while Haiji just freezes in thought, sweat dripping down his temple. Because to him, it's only a plain aluminum bow, the kind he'd treat like an S-rank kitchen knife. And that's when a nasty question claws its way into his mind. What exactly did he forge? In a cozy wooden cabin tucked among the trees, Haiji stands over a bubbling pot while Curia leans in, tail twitching as she grins and says the food smells delicious. The party stew roared as it boiled, churning up huge chunks of meat and blasting thick plumes of steam into the sky. AG tells him the brown soup is built on miso, soybeans fermented with salt and koji, then scoops some into a bowl and urges her to dig in. With a grateful smile, she raises a bite of the meat and lets it hit her lips. She beams with pure joy and practically yells that it's unbelievably delicious. She happily digs into the meal, and Haiji leans in to say that the meat came straight from the prey she caught. Then he grins and admits he's relieved he chose to make the miso, because he learned the craft back during his royal palace days. His expression deepens as he stares at a plain kitchen knife, and the thought hits him like a wave. How the heck could an S-rank blade be forged from something this simple? That thought slammed into a brutal memory. One stern, scarred man jabbed a blade at him and raged nonstop, screaming that Haji had been coddled by his parents his whole life, and that he was nothing but a useless waste who only ever churned out Durank or Arank items. He sat alone in the silence, letting that brutal memory loop in his head as he wondered under his breath whether his old master was okay. That same master craftsman sat outside the grand building, puffing his pipe and muttering to himself about whether Haiji was even holding up, while his two co-workers, a bald blacksmith and a younger man, froze in shock. The bald one demanded to know why Haiji's name was suddenly on his tongue, asking if he was worried, and the master snapped back with a scowl, pressing for exactly what that question was supposed to mean. The bald blacksmith leaned in, snapped that he'd been the one yelling at Hoggy and didn't even bother to see him off, then replayed Hoggy's awkward little smile while everyone else watched in silence, before landing the verdict. Hoggy must have been stuck, unable to forge anything within the required range. His colleague's guess was dead wrong, and the master craftsman snapped that the swords and armor Haiji made were sitting at the very bottom, an E rank. The bald guy just gawked, blinking, mouthing an E, like he couldn't believe it. Then the master wheeled on him and demanded, "Whoever told you I'm angry at Haiji?" Arms locked across his chest, he laid out his reasoning. If he'd given Haiji an inch of slack, the kid would have gotten comfortable and complacent. His strictness wasn't for show, it was the only way to make sure Haiji stayed focused on the job, crafting B-rank items and nothing else. His coworkers still couldn't wrap their heads around it, so the younger craftsman shot back. "Isn't making rank items supposed to be good?" Then, in a blast of memory, the master's voice roared that Hoggy was a fool for forging rank equipment when he'd already been told, loud and clear, to make. Rage swallowed the master whole. He roared that he couldn't bear seeing Haiji, then ordered the A-rank weapons handed to the soldiers before throwing Haiji out for good. And his colleagues just stared. The younger one's horror hit late, realizing Haiji wasn't banished for being useless. He was exiled because he was ridiculously talented. Slipping back into the present, the master craftsman took a heavy drag from his pipe and wondered, out loud, if King's grand plan had some secret purpose behind it. Then he started replaying the day in his head. What if he'd cast out Hoggy on the spot without that second thought? His words faded as he got pulled back into the memories. In a clearing just outside the city, Cruel's eyes darken as she sneers to herself that the whole country is done for. Then she whirls on Haiji, demanding what he's up to, since she thought he was taking the day off. Haiji says he's got something he wants to try, and Cruel wastes no time, snapping, "Then I'll help." He stares at the rough forge he built with his own hands, then locks in on the secret of that S-ranked forge back in the capital, and decides this backyard setup won't be derailed by whatever weird power it has. With a sharp smile, she turns the cruelty on and tells her managing the heat outside is a nightmare, then asks for her help. Without missing a beat, she jumps in, thrilled to assist. He wastes no time. Once again, like clockwork, Haiji lunges toward the flames while Cruel effortlessly hoists a huge, heavy bucket of water for Quenkish. A little while later, he declares it finished, then lifts his freshly forged kitchen knife, locks eyes on it with a killer kind of awe, and practically can't believe how beautiful it looks, even though he made it in the simplest place imaginable. He trudges up to a huge tree stump with the new blade in hand, then realizes the brutal truth. Without his appraisal skill, he can't tell if it's A-rank or S-rank just by staring at it. So he snaps into action. He's going to test it. He flicks his wrist and hurls the knife, wham. It buries itself in the stump, the wood splits, and a blazing, unstoppable light bursts out. He snaps into recognition right away. It's exactly like that sword from back then. As he gapes at the blazing blade, memories hit hard. Back in the Royal Smith, the sword he forged got split in two, just like this knife he forged outside. And now he's left staring at the question. Does this mean the result becomes a ray? He grips the brand new knife and stares at it like it might explode with power, wondering what hidden force is brewing inside the royal forge. Cruel smirks through it all, then blurts out, "That blade is insane. Just look at what it did to a sword, cutting it in half." Her cheerful praise gets snatched away when her pointed ear twitches at some distant sound, and she blurts that a visitor is here, then bolts into the woods, leaving poor Haji standing there, stunned, begging the question. Who in the world could have just shown up? In the blink of an eye, she snaps into her true draconic form, rockets into the sky on thunderous wingbeats, and shouts that she'll go greet their guest. He watches her shrink into the distance, a tiny speck lost in the sky, then spots someone closing in on foot. It's a young woman, wrecked with exhaustion and raw emotion. He freezes, realizes who it is, and shouts her name. Right after that, they're crammed inside his home, and Phil Nell, glass of water in hand, shoots him an apology for the sudden drop-in, confessing that whatever shocked her left her stunned. So she just burst in here without even thinking. She leans in and tells him straight that she thinks she's the one slowing him down, and Haji just stares back with worry in his eyes, while Cruel, back in her human form again, waits beside the table. Cruel steps in with cold confidence, swats off Filmo's worries, and shoots back that the Deletive Forest is pure trouble. Monsters everywhere, not a single guard in sight. And then she flashes a grin, offering herself like it's a deal. If Filmo needs a carriage, all she has to do is call. This offer finally points Filmo straight at why she came. Her smile vanishes, her face hardens, and when she starts explaining, it hits. Someone made a claim about the knife. Agi and Cruel lock eyes, both stunned out of their minds. Then they burst into disbelief, shouting a claim. Her shock snaps into fury the second it hits. Why, she screams with draconic eyes blazing. Haiji's knife is unreal, so what on earth could possibly go wrong with it? He tries to calm her down, begging Cruel to let the rage go, then whips his anxious stare back to the merchant. "What's happening, Phil Nell?" he demands. She pauses, then answers in a low voice. "It's too sharp." She kicks off her tail. She says the knife was meant for the head chef of her client, but new cook used it in secret, and in his rush he fumbled hard and the knife tore out of his grip. A blade slammed downward, and then she goes, "Here, that's the wild part you won't believe." She says it was so vicious it nearly carved into the new cook's foot as it dropped. Then the knife slammed into the stone floor with a brutal crash, driving its tip deep into the rock. After she finishes her tale, she slams down to the floor, bowing so hard her forehead kisses the wood. Then she blurts, "Hey, wait, I recognize your incredible skill." Her voice cracks with raw anguish, and you can tell every ounce of effort it took was poured into that work. He stares down at her bowed form, and a gentler look washes over his face as he finally gets it. He knows that telling a craftsman their work is useless isn't criticism, it's a gut punch to their skill, and he swears he understands the sting you're trapped in. "Please, Phil Noel," he murmurs, "raise your head." He stared at her with fresh, unshakable resolve and declared his plan. He'd forge a knife so dull it was made on purpose. Hearing that, Phil Nell's eyes brimmed with tears as she called out his name, and he snapped into a new truth. Chasing a flawless edge is just a craftsman's ego, because what really matters is the person who will wield the tool in the end. She stared at the brand new blade in his grip, stunned, speechless, then blurted out that it had to be an A-rank kitchen knife, and he nodded, confirming it was exactly what he'd just forged. Filmo's appraisal stamped that knife as A-rank, and he even heard his last blade somehow had been S-rank, but no one could explain why it turned out that insanely perfect. Once the new design got the green light, he slammed down the decision and vowed to start production, while Phil Nell practically shook with excitement, clasping his hand and saying yes to every bit of it. Several days later, it was finally done, the deal sealed. While Hagi stood by the roadside, waving like crazy as Phil Nell rode off with her horse, and cart hauled along, now packed heavy with all his wares. She came back grinning wide, saying she'd wiped out every last knife, completely sold out. Then he just stared, stunned, and blurted, "No way, are you serious?" She told them the knives were flying off the shelves faster than she could even restock them. And her plan to win over housewives had worked so well that she was suddenly drowning in eager customers, each one insisting they get a knife of their own. She lights up and tells Haiji the knives are top-notch, pushes him to stop downplaying himself, and credits the whole win to his marketing. while Haiji, a little overwhelmed, can only crack an awkward, nervous laugh. With an honest look on her face, she leans in and tells him they've already gotten more orders, and then asks, straight up, if he can make 100 more knives for them. His face goes ghost pale with shock. 100. And he blurts out, totally stunned by how massive her request is, then turns around and questions her humility, reminding her she's the one who has to cough up the money for the materials. The order crushes down on his shoulders, and all he can force out is a shaky, tired laugh. Later that night, a brutal storm tears through the forest. Rain hammers the trees, and lightning rips across the pitch-black sky. In the middle of the storm, Cruel stands alone, drenched to the bone, her face set like stone, mumbling under her breath as if she's daring whatever's coming next. She charges deeper into the rain-soaked woods, eyes darting through the shadows as panic builds. Where the hell is her target? Rain pounds steadily on a tiny, rustic cabin, drumming off the eaves, while inside a wooden bucket slowly starts to overflow as a ceiling leak keeps dripping. Inside, the hero stands under the chaos of the downpour, staring at the ceiling as he mutters that this roof leak can't keep getting patched. It needs a real, permanent fix. A thunderous shout slams in behind him, shattering his focus. He whips around in shock to find C there, soaked to the bone, her face looming in a creepy, unnatural shadow. Her menacing face collapses into a playful grin, rainwater sliding off her as she tilts her head and asks, with a mischievous smile, if she startled him. He let out a huge sigh of relief, sweat beading on his temple, and then, right outside, Cruel stood grinning in the rain while shattered roof planks clattered down, saying it felt as refreshing as a cold bath and thanking him for the emergency repairs. She lets out a small sneeze as she dries off, and he snaps his head over with worry, only for her to wave it off fast, swearing that as a dragon she can't possibly catch a cold. It whips away, flustered, clutching a cloth, trying desperately not to stare as her drenched clothes cling to her back. Trying to find a smarter way to get warmed up, he pitches the idea of making a meal. And the second the pot starts to simmer, Cruel blurts out, way too excited, "So what are we eating for dinner?" Inside their hideout, a huge pot of braised meat keeps bubbling away. Haiji swears at the giant boar they just crushed. Cruel's eyes glint with pure hunger as he stares, loving how soft the meat looks and how mouth-watering the soup smells. She takes her first bite, and her face lights up like fireworks, pure bliss. "It's so good," she gasps, praising how tender and sweet it is, then declares it's the best food she's ever tasted in her entire life. Seated at the table, she throws her arms up in pure celebration, swearing that every single dish HG cooks is absolutely delicious. And he just watches with a small smile, wondering, does she really say that every single time she eats one of his cookies? Gaze drifts over to the last chunks of meat in the pot, thinking it'd hit even harder with some cock-coney seasoning, then grumbles because this world doesn't seem to have mirin or soy sauce. He keeps chewing on the culinary limits, wondering if anyone here even knows how to make dashi broth, and then it hits him. Maybe one of those earlier summoned heroes brought the idea with them. Still, he has a problem to solve fast, so he decides he'd better eat something himself. He stared at his empty bowl and the chopsticks just waiting there, and then, bam, realization hit him like a jolt. He shoots a glare at Cruel, still chomping away like she owns the place. And annoyance spikes across his face as he realizes, at this rate, she'll leave him with not a single bite. Right as he lunges for the pot with his chopsticks, Cruel's hands shoot in first, snatching the meat he was aiming for. Then she barks a sharp shush, whips around with a furious stare, and demands to know if he's trying to steal her portion. She and Haiji crouch under their cover and peer out, eyes locked on the room, tension tightening with every second. In the very next moment, their eyes snap open with the same stunned shock. Right when fear hits, a strange young girl with feline ears drops out of nowhere and starts tearing into the food on the table like she's starving. Then she fixes them with a ruthless stare and vows they're not getting away. A second later, the girl's trapped upside down, her eyes spinning from dizzying whiplash. Then she blurts out a frantic apology, admitting she's a horrible person for stealing Haiji's horn. Tears shimmered in her eyes as she kept apologizing, begging him to understand she was starving. Yet Cruel just watched, annoyed, snapping that she can't take what belongs to someone else just because her stomach's empty. Haiji takes a gentler approach, spots her soaked through, and immediately asks if she got caught in the rain, and Sue admits she was out searching for something in the downpour. Then Haiji waves off her worries about the horn, telling her to just let it go, even as her cruel disapproval keeps burning on. Her kindness shatters her at the worst moment. Tears pour down her face as she collapses and begs Haiji for help, urging him to find her papa and mama. Later on, the three end up seated at the table, and Soot digs in with fresh energy, gushing that the food is insanely delicious, while Haiji watches her closely and blurts out whether this means she's a lost child. Su devoured her food with pure delight, bragging that she came from the divine beast clan living deep in the Dalida forest, while Cruel watched her like a hawk, narrowing it down as a white wolf tribe member. She scoffs at divine beast, saying her own power wipes the floor with it, and Haiji, stunned, can only blurt, God, in total disbelief. That's what's messing with his head. The Dalida forest is a so-called forest of spirits and divine beasts. But the truth is way darker. Most of what lives there are just demonic beasts. The real divine beasts, they're territorial to the bone, especially the white wolf tribe where Su belongs, and yeah, they live like vagrants, never staying put. They trudge across this endless wilderness, and one question keeps clawing at their minds. Why on earth is the Dalida forest, their supposed home, so impossibly huge? AG blurts out, so you're saying there are 200 of you in the capital, and Cruel snaps back that this is anything but cute. Su hears it all, shoulders sinking as memories hit, like the moment she was warned she'd only be a burden. Sorrow snaps into steel as she shouts with fists clenched, and Haiji asks if that means she got thrown out of her pack, only for Cruel truth to land hard. Once you're gone, you can't come back. The moment hits Haiji like lightning. Su isn't just gone for a while, she's been permanently exiled. He studies the small, determined girl in front of him, and their eyes snap together, like they've just shared a silent promise. A memory snapped into Haji's mind, an older man's stern, judging glare. Then it flipped to his younger self, turning his back on the royal court and marching off with the king left behind, a heavy sack thumping over his shoulder. The memory slipped away the second Cruel's voice rang out, calling his name and snapping him back to the present. Then he soothed her with a gentle hand on her head and told her, "Don't worry." Then he snapped his gaze to tearful Su and declared, loud and certain, he'd be the one to find her parents. Cruel stared them both down, her face like stone as she weighed his decision in silence. With their new purpose blazing in their hearts, the crew stepped off the safe road and tore into the bigger world, ready for whatever came next. Wearing his armor at last, Hagi pushed straight through the forest, with Cruel Siu at his side, except the cheer was back and that earlier despair was gone. Her fresh rush of excitement made her stumble over a twisted, gnarled path, and Haiji snapped in quickly, warning her to tone down the noise before she hurt herself. She snapped herself upright and flashed him a bright thank you, but his answer died instantly, because he just stared, stunned, as the top of her dress slid down and bared her shoulders, freezing her in a wave of sheer embarrassment. As the three push through the forest side by side, Cruel leans toward Haiji and warns him not to pamper Su too hard. But Haiji just smiles, soft and steady, agreeing with her while reminding her that Su is still a kid. She keeps her thoughts locked away, convinced Su is a divine beast, born with a stubborn, strict nature, so she refuses to baby her because coddling won't help her grow. Her advice bounces off him like nothing. Hagi just flashes that calm smile and offers a lame little sure. And she snaps, throws her hands up, and demands to know if he's even listening at all. Their argument backfires, straight up jolts Su into blushing, because it hits her hard. Cruel really was genuinely worried about her, and all this time she'd been convinced he couldn't stand her. Haiji shoots a quick glance back, like he just cracked the truth, and spots that cruel, scaled tail flicking back and forth, proving she's snapping with harsh words but secretly doesn't really hate the girl. Once her point lands, Cruel snaps into a dazzling white dragon, her true form unleashed. She declares she'll soar over the area to scout it, then tells the other two to hold tight and wait for her return. Paige and Su huddle side by side as the massive dragon surges upward, claws flaring, then vanishes into the sky like a legend flying away. While they wait, he drops onto a rock, pulls out a chunk of wood and his carving knife from his pack, and starts carving away to kill the time. He clocked that Cruel still hadn't come back from her scouting run, so he snapped his attention to his other partner and shouted, "Hey, Su, When he got no reply, he snapped his head around, and there she was, the young girl fast asleep in the grass. He couldn't help it. A little gasp of surprise slipped out. She finally dropped into a deep sleep, peaceful as can be. And even in her dreams, a soft murmur slipped out about how quiet everything was, nothing like her loud, chaotic life. As he watched her, a smile broke across his face. He gently rubbed her head between those ears, and it hit him like, wow, I'm basically acting like a parent. Then he decided right then. Next time, he'd craft something for her out of oak. From the darkest depths of the forest, a pack of wolf-like monsters bursts out, their black fur bristling as they snarl, teeth flashing, and glowing eyes lock onto their prey while they surge forward. Their approach doesn't slip by unnoticed. Those suscat-like ears twitch hard, snapping toward the source and zeroing in on the danger about to hit. A bolt of sudden alertness snaps Haiji's focus. Before he can even ask why, she clamps a finger to her lips and hisses, eyes wide with panic, shushing him like their lives depend on it, and the second they both spin toward the danger, Haiji instantly gets it. Something is seriously wrong. They huddle at the edge of the clearing, staring into the thick woods where the terrifying sounds are blasting out, and the air turns heavy as a storm is about to break. Pure terror spikes across Sue's face the moment she spots the danger. Her fangs peek out as she trembles, whispering the name like it's a curse. Ashuhao. His face tightens as he processes her words, and the truth hits him. Ashu hounds, C-rank monsters. They're boxed in now, surrounded with nowhere to run, and when Sue looks up at him with terror in her eyes, he knows it's already gone bad. But he doesn't waste a second. He grabs the startled Sue, hauls her into his arms, and snaps, "We're running." He whips around, bursts into a sprint, and barrels deeper into the forest. Then he yells about the luggage for half a heartbeat, shuts that idea down fast, and roars that he'll grab it later. Right now, surviving is the only thing that matters. He sprinted through the tall grass, boots stomping and splashing through the damp earth as he pushed his body past every limit. Behind him, the Ashu hounds thundered right on his heels, dark shapes streaking through the undergrowth like living shadows. Even with danger lurking, Sue looked like she was loving every second, laughing with a grin as she yelled that Hoggy was running way too fast, while he struggled through it because deep down he knew. Yeah, he might look like some old man, but he was still the former hero. Even as a former hero, rotten and all, his one-of-a-kind skills were the reason he could keep going like this. And he knew he only had to last a little longer until they finally reached the blacksmith's forge. He spotted a tiny abandoned hut up ahead, and the idea snapped into place like a lightning strike. Those demonic beasts were drawn to the smell of fire, so if he could bait them straight into that hut, maybe, just maybe, he'd get his shot. Right when he thought victory was finally within reach, a vicious growl exploded from straight behind him. One of the hounds exploded forward, hot breath blasting out, as sharp fangs snapped shut on the space between them in an instant. The force of the attack ripped through him, and he stumbled hard to the ground, only to look up and realize he was trapped, flanked by two beasts whose glowing eyes screamed with murderous hunger. Beasts closed in from every side, and he realized they weren't just feral, they were smart. Then right behind him, a tiny figure stepped out, Sue. She grabbed the moment and barked for him to put her down. She slid into position beside him, and together they braced back to back while that brutal pack circled in tight, crackling with tension as a sharp metallic clang rang out. Then he bared his knife, ready for the fight that was coming no matter what. He snapped his head back to the little girl and barked for her to stay put, then tore his eyes across the pack of hounds. Too many, all teeth and hunger, because he knew guarding Sue while holding them back would be an absolute nightmare. But she refused to back down. She whipped up a brutal, defiant roar with those cat-like ears, her little face twisting with unexpected fury, and Haiji could only freeze in stunned silence, shocked at how fearless she was. Her bravery hit him like a punch, and he couldn't stop asking himself, what was he even doing, standing there while a kid that small fought with that kind of spirit? In that instant, it dawned on him. Sue was the real hero, not him. That hit him like a hammer. There was no way a man who couldn't protect even one kid deserved to call himself a hero, not even if he tried to hide behind the role of a decoy. Before his resolve could fade, one of the hounds exploded forward and lunged straight into Sue's savage counter. Just as the beast tried to strike, a shadowy, whip-thin appendage snapped forward at blinding speed and slammed into the attack with a violent blur. The hound got slammed into the dirt, then the salt cut off like someone yanked the fuse. The rest of the pack jerked back in shock, and Haji's face twisted with grim satisfaction as he thought, all right. He studies the beast still standing, worry carving deep lines across his face. But the hounds don't even flinch. Those growls roar on like their packmates gone for good, and the truth hits him hard. His show of force scared nobody. His gaze snaps to a rocky outcrop above, where a huge, multi-tailed beast looms and scans everything below. Then he immediately knows. That monster is the pack's leader. He realizes there's no other way. If he wants even a chance to live, he has to take down that leader, and his resolve locks in like steel as he stares his target down. Right before he even gets a chance to move, a colossal shadow wipes across the clearing. Then a massive white dragon drops from the heavens, wings stretched wide, shaking the air like thunder. A thunderous ancient dragon's roar rips through the forest, and it demands the hounds, right to their faces, why they tormented Haji and Sue. Relief hits Haji like a wave, and a huge grin erupts as he spots that magnificent creature. Then he bellows, cruel, while Sue just stares up, wide-eyed in pure awe. He answers with a brutal nod as the great dragon hammers them with a devastating blast, scattering the Ashu hounds like leaves in a wild storm. Then Haiji just stares, stunned, as the survivors spin around and bolt, and a fresh nightmare hits him. Their escape route cuts way too close to the subjugation grounds. Then his focus snaps back to the dragon, only to see several figures standing there, totally calm, riding on her back. It's Sue's tribe, the White Wolf people, staring down at the crushed enemy below. He watched Sue square up to the newcomers, her ears twitching like she was on edge. Before he could even react, a male tribesman slammed out a brutal burst of power and wiped the last of the Asho hounds clean off the map in one violent instant. He just gawked in shock at the raw power he'd witnessed, and then the long-haired warrior looked him dead in the eye, cool as ice, saying it only made sense. Hagi had been taking care of their suit. The warrior flashed a smile and declared, "We're the White Wolf tribe." Then one more member stepped forward, clutching their gratitude tight as they thanked Haji for keeping the young girl safe. Just like that, his focus got ripped away. Cruel, now dressed in a humanoid body, burst from the trees and screamed his name, and he could barely choke out her name back in shock. She lunged into a tight embrace, gripping him like he'd slipped away, and her voice cracked with pure relief. Then she told him she was so thankful he was safe, and she begged forgiveness for leaving him alone. Deep in the hog's heat, Sue is pinned to Haji's chest, her cheeks burning crimson while the whole White Wolf tribe leans in and watches the reunion like it's pure comedy. She finally loosened her grip, and Cruel snapped around to Sue, thanking her for saving Haji. While just a few steps away, a short-haired tribe girl stared and demanded out loud whether Sue really had been the one who protected her. That reunion happened only because Krull moved like lightning. She shot through the sky, caught Sue's location from the cry in the air, and instantly knew the little girl was shielding. Back on solid ground, all doubts evaporated, fast. The woman from the tribe who'd hesitated before slammed into her in a tight, grateful hug, thanking her over and over for the courage she showed. After the hug, Sue stared down at a tiny, unfamiliar thing in her hands, then snapped her gaze up at Haiji with wide, burning curiosity, demanding to know what he'd just pressed into her care. He told them Sue was no ordinary creature. She was a divine beast, a true god bell, and the moment those words hit, the White Wolf tribe erupted in pure, trembling awe. He kept going, insisting the mystery item was a cowbell, and telling her that if she wore it, she'd be protected. Then the tribe's leader immediately nodded along, ready to back that promise. With the gift finally passed and accepted, the moment of goodbye slammed in, and the White Wolf tribe lit up, waving wildly as they shouted farewells to Haji and Cruel. They walked off, then spun back to wave one last time, while Sue's brand new bell chimed cheerfully behind us, fading into the air. Later, in his brand new quiet home, Haji whipped up a simple meal, cracking an egg into a bowl while cruel thoughts swirled in his head, convinced she had to be starving. He settles at the table and then, bam, this irate, cruel girl stomps in. She slams her hands down and roars that her food is gone, saying she was excited about what he brought back from town, but her portion vanished. She accuses him of eating it, and he stays cool, flat out denying it and insisting he didn't touch a thing. He insists that if she's going to blame him, she has to let him talk, because he's not the culprit, not even close. Then they lock eyes, and that tiny clatter snaps the tension. Suddenly, it hits him on the boat. Their eyes snap to where the noise came from. Under the table, Sue peeks out and happily licks her fingers clean, and Haiji blurts out her name in pure disbelief. With a happy smile and a little crumb still on her cheek, Sue tilts her head up, totally unbothered, and then she chirps that she got separated from her group again. In Muriel's kingdom, a brutal downpour hammered the grand royal castle, slamming rain into every spire beneath a sky so dark it felt like the world was holding its breath. Inside, the master craftsman leans in the hallway, staring at the rain that hangs so dark in the air. He grumbles that it'll make their iron rust, then snaps in pure frustration at someone unseen. Hurry up, stop that leak. Elsewhere in the castle, the royal minister is trembling with rage over the same kind of problem. He roars at the workers, furious that a stain is spreading across the pale blue ceiling, because that leak is wrecking a precious blue dye, imported from another country. He bellows orders for the nearby guy to sprint over, stop that leak, right now, and the servant scrambles on the floor, slamming a wooden tub in place to catch every drop. While the master blacksmith and his colleague rush to the master craftsman, they spill the news that the main palace corridor is leaking again, and it's spreading to other parts too. Meanwhile, the craftsman stays calm as the enraged royal minister storms off in the background. He takes a drag from his pipe, then calmly nods yes, saying that for the last 2 or 3 years, ever since Hiro Hagi showed up, the leaks just vanished without a trace. One blacksmith blurts out that he can't believe it, while the other leans in and points out that the roof tiles on their smithy are shaped differently. And yeah, they're downright gorgeous. The master craftsman swings them away, shouting that their break is done and herding them back into the smithy, while the bell tolls and his crew streams out. Then he just stares into the rain, quietly wondering what Haji is up to right now. Outside a rustic wooden house, Cruel and Sue stride up to Haji grinning like they've got a secret, and Cruel happily fires off the question, "What's on the schedule today?" while Sue leans in right after, dying to know what they're about to do. Since the cottage has gotten painfully cramped, he's decided it's time to tear in and renovate. He even lays out a simple floor plan, showing which walls he'll knock down to open up the rooms and carve out brand new guest space. Sue watches, worried, reminding him that the White Wolf tribe has temporarily put her in charge of him, and that they'll need rooms for the other kids too. Cruel keeps going, saying that on top of the house they'll also retile the forge's roof, and she snaps back that that's the real job for the day, leaving Sue staring in confusion like, "Wait, what even is retiling?" He breaks it all down. These tiles are crafted from clay and stacked in layers so they laugh in the face of heat, keeping the forge from frying in summer while trapping warmth through winter, exactly the steady temperature he's chasing for his work. Cruel remarks hit hard, saying his description sounds just like her own scales. Haji nods along, fresh fire in his eyes, and declares they're heading straight for the mountains to hunt for clay. And both Cruel and Suture burst in, agreeing with wild enthusiasm. Moments later, in a rocky patch of forest, Haji slams a shovel into the earth and strikes a rich deposit, while Sue stands right beside him, grinning as she clutches a huge, freshly dug chunk of clay. She stops his digging cold as Sue steps in, lifts the clay, and hands it over to Cruel, who's already towering in that massive white dragon form. With a calm, controlled motion, the dragon snatches the clay, drops it into a big wooden crate strapped to her back, and seals the deal for transport. Back at their homestead, Hoggy kicks off the next phase. He needs a giant pile of damp clay, and he's using his bare feet to work it in. Sue watches the steady rhythm, murmuring his name like she's calling the whole project to life. She studies a tiny clay figurine shaped like pure cruelty, then unveils it with a dramatic flourish, and he can't help staring, because it's surprisingly well made, like she's secretly got real talent tucked away, and then he turns to Sue and tells her she can help too. He then jabs a finger at the massive wooden contraption in the workshop, asks Haji what the cannon S for, and clears it up fast. Turns out it's not a weapon at all, it's an extruder machine. He launches into the instructions. First, they shove the clay into the top opening. Then with the molding plate locked in place, all three of them, Haji, Cruel, and Sue, slam down on the big lever and force the dough out into one long, perfectly even shape. With the clay finally sitting on the table, Cruel cheers erupt. She pulled it off. Hage leans in and says the secret is simple. Slam the pressure straight down. Then he grins and declares the next move, cut the slab. He shows everyone how to use a wire to slice that massive chunk of clay into neat little tiles, while Krull and Sue stare, hanging on his every move. He then tells them that once they're cut, the tiles have to sit and dry for days, and to finish the job they'll need a kiln, so he proposes they build a basic one out back. Cruel and Sue can't wait, and they agree right away. Following HG's instructions, the two girls sprint into action and dig a pit kiln at full throttle while HG lays out the design. By linking two underground holes, fresh oxygen can flow through and keep the kiln blazing hot for the firing. As soon as the kiln's ready, the real work kicks off. Those dry tiles get dipped in glaze, then lined up inside the firing pit, ready to be blasted into life. Inside the kiln, the tiles blaze under deadly heat, and every move has to be perfect. Dip them in glaze, then fire them slow and steady, or one wrong temperature shock will make them crack. And just like that, boom, he crushes it with a resounding success. Haji stands there, surrounded by cheering voices as Cruel and Sue flank him, and he proudly raises a perfectly crafted tile, declaring, "It's done." You hold up the tile and make them stare, saying that the glaze gives it that glass-slick surface that shrugs off water and dirt, while Sue marvels at how blindingly shiny and smooth it looks. Once the materials are set, Haji fires back that it's time to lay the tiles on the roof, and everyone answers with one loud, excited cry. Their excitement practically crackles in the air as they shoot their fists up, pumped and ready to kick off the next phase of construction. Their wild celebration gets yanked to a stop when Haji climbs up onto the fresh, newly tiled roof, warning Cruel it's way too soon to celebrate until they check for leaks. So Cruel fires off a terrifying torrent of water and soaks the roof, blasting the startled Haji right through the moment. He braces himself on the slick roof, wiping the rain off his face and grumbling that he almost ate dirt after the fall. Then Sue calls out, asking about leaks, and Cruel's concern spikes as she demands to know if he's okay, but he shoots back fast that he's totally fine. His calm reassurance hits, then the voice from the rooftop booms with victory. The test is a pass. And down below, Cruel and Sue explode into jubilant cheers, celebrating like they just won everything. With the roof finally sealed, Haiji spins to the forge's next upgrade, hammer in hand. And right as he swings, the master craftsman strides over, calling out that back when Haiji was just a decorative hero. His job wasn't only fighting monsters. He filled in for whatever the crew lacked, even tile making. Then the master points and orders him to get started. He grinds out a fresh glaze, and the moment his mind drifts, those old stylish red tiles flash back, beautiful as hell, but totally fragile. So he keeps remaking his own glaze again and again just to handle the non-stop repairs he's handed. Before he can finish, the master craftsman explodes. He snaps that the royal minister is a total fool, and then he lays it out to the worried Haji. He'd already warned them the forge's roof was totally ruined, yet the minister never even showed up to stop the hero, so those old tiles were left to get wrecked by years of neglect. Later outside, he shouts for Krull to bring him a pot, and she, with curious Sue right beside her, watches him closely, while Krull demands what he's planning to cook. He grins and tells her, "Don't you dare peek." All that hard work pays off. He's got a pot packed with perfectly cooked potatoes, and the moment the smell hits, someone blurts out that they look absolutely delicious. Cruel and Sue dug in eagerly to eat, but he stopped them cold, ordering them to wait just one more moment. He then whips out a little container and asks if they won't want their potatoes way tastier, then declares the contents are horse butter, saying he'll slash across the top of each potato, leaving both Sue and Cruel utterly baffled. He proves his point by dropping a slice of butter onto a scalding hot potato and watching it melt on the spot, then declares this is the only way to eat it, telling them to watch closely as it happens. With Cruel and Sue right on his heels, they both bite in, and that rich, bold flavor hits like lightning, blowing their minds and freezing them in pure, stunned pleasure. She and Sue demolish those potatoes like they haven't eaten in days, and Haiji loses his patience. He shouts for them to slow down because that butter is pure luxury and it costs a fortune. With their hunger finally crushed, Sue flashes a happy grin and calls it a perfect reward for all their hard work. Then from the kitchen, Haiji spots that sure, butter's basically a luxury here, but they've still got a little left. A few days later, he's standing in the forest with an axe riding over his shoulder, spots the perfect tree, and jaw set with pure determination, hurls the blade down with everything he's got. Right when the blade is about to bite, a brutal flash of light explodes from the tree trunk. So hard it slams him backward onto the ground, and he blurts out, shaken, demanding to know where that light came from. He's cut off the moment Cruel and Sue tear in beside him, Cruel barking, "Why were you trying to hack the doll down?" While Sue snaps back, "Get ready, you're about to get scolded for this." She shoots him a question, "Are you really ready to face punishment for cutting down that tree?" Still weak from the injury, he snaps back, "Who would even punish me?" Then the name hits Dalida and it finally clicks. That's the name of this very forest. Cruel tells Sue that Dalida is the forest's great god, and chopping down a tree without permission will unleash their wrath. Sue shakes in terror and admits that a furious Dalida is way worse than her own father. He asked what kind of scary she meant, but she wouldn't meet his eyes, grim and cruel. And then he just snapped, saying for him it would be the absolute worst. At that terrifying warning, Sue's face turns ghost pale and her whole body trembles, because the idea of being erased from the world completely is more than she can handle. She explains that Dalida's half-body sometimes flickers into the forest, and while Haiji's still reeling, he demands answers. Is this happening more often now? Because why would cutting just one tree unleash a blast of divine power like that? She keeps going, saying that when things get this bad, the right move is to leave an offering to Dalida at the foot of the tree. Then Haiji just stares, totally confused, and out of nowhere he blurts that he wants to eat something. Right then it hits him. He needs a potato with butter. He blurts out an apology saying he's already chopped the butter up, then stops dead, confused, like, "Why am I thinking about this right now?" His wild declaration has both Sue and the cruel crowd reeling. Eyes wide, mouths shut, stunned not just by what he said, but by the fact he's still holding on to butter like it's the only thing that matters. Even though it's totally ridiculous, someone carefully kneels at the great tree's base and sets down one humble potato, slathered with a huge, buttery scoop, like it's sacred. Moments later, a warm glow pours out from the offering, and Sue instantly feels the shift in the air, chirping happily because Dalida absolutely loved the meal and is all smiles. Haji stares at the light, realizing he has to handle the woody cut with way more care now. Once the forest gods were finally appeased, the whole crew threw themselves into a massive victory feast, and Haiji lifted his cup, grinning as he declared that with the wood they snagged safely, the renovation of their room was finally finished. At the edge of the woods, a mysterious woman with short, light hair leans out from behind a tree, dark armor hugging her every move, and a sword rides at her hip. Her eyes lock onto a lonely wooden house in the distance, and recognition hits like a spark. That's the place, that's the house. Inside a tavern, the armored hero, Haiji, suddenly screams as the ground yanks him down hard, and he jerks his head up in pure shock. Right over him stands a formidable elf swordswoman with light hair and dark skin, calm as stone, one hand resting on her blade's hilt, and Haiji clenches his teeth, trying to figure out just who in the world she is. The scene snaps into place, and the elf swordswoman stands front and center as the patrons roar with applause. Then she coolly spits that her blade isn't for carving up pathetic weaklings. Smiling, Philnell the young merchant steps in, showers her with praise, and slips her a drink on the house, urging her to order anything her heart wants. Leaner then shoots out a shaky denial, insisting she didn't make the fancy kitchen knife the elf is staring at, while her own trembling thoughts spiral as her worry stares back in the blade's mirror-smooth shine. As she keeps talking, Philno practically gushes over the blade, swearing it's a damn good knife she snagged from a traveling merchant. And then her voice fades out when she realizes the elf's eyes have already wandered off. She spins on her heel and marches straight for the exit. No last words, no hesitation. As she disappears, the whole tavern erupts in hushed whispers, pinning her as a dark elf swordswoman and calling her name like it burns. Belfair. Outside, Belfair, the warrior of purple lightning, halts in midstride, her face impossible to read, standing alone as the whole town blurs behind her. The scene snaps into a rustic workshop. Haiji, dressed as a blacksmith, grinds away at a tiny anvil while a brutal inner humanoid form hammers glowing metal beside him, and the clangs of their relentless work ricochet through the little smithy. A young, cheerful elf apprentice suddenly bursts in front of Haige, beaming as she proudly brandishes her brand-new forged knife, eyes shining with pure excitement while she demands, "So, what do you think of my work?" She can't even breathe as Hoggy scrutinizes the kitchen knife she forged, lifting it, tracing the blade's edge, and mumbling something under his breath like he's testing a secret, while his face stays stone cold. "Let's see." After a beat of careful thought, he calls it well made, and the elf apprentice throws her arms up like she just won the world, shouting pure joy, while AG watches and thinks, that fearless way she handles the forge heat. That's the makings of a real blacksmith. While the apprentice is still celebrating, Cruel suddenly shows up, praises the young elf's solid muscle, then snaps her compliments to Haiji. She credits his master craftsman's status as the reason the apprentice is winning, and she goes even further, saying the sight of him hammering out a plain kitchen knife is downright striking, and it makes Haiji's ears go hot. He stays silent as a heat of blush creeps up his face, and the elf apprentice slides in close with a grin that screams trouble, asking why he's blushing. Hoggy snaps her a hand over his mouth and swears he's not, because no one's ever complimented him like that before. She bursts into hearty laughter, finding his awkward reaction weirdly adorable. Then she pats his head playfully, thanking Cruel for cooking up that perfect moment. Later, Haji and Cruel are settled at the table when Sue suddenly bursts into the room, and the cat-eared girl practically vibrates with excitement as she declares she's whipped up awesome food for them. She slides out a massive platter of colossal rice balls, sparkling like a threat, and demands to know what's inside. Then Sue just shoves the answer out of the way and urges her to take a bite. Haji takes a bite and her eyes instantly sparkle. She blurts out that it's a boiled egg, then gushes that the seasoning tastes incredible. He watches her reaction, swallows his nerves, and tries one himself, then pauses, clearly stunned by how good it is. He took one bite of the rice ball, and his face twisted instantly in shock. That wild strawberry hit like sour lightning, and he blurted out what it was before he even finished chewing. Then Sue flashed a huge fang grin and leaned in, practically begging him to admit he liked it. He snapped himself back together, admitting the flavor was wild and not everyone's cup of tea. But he genuinely loved it, and when Sue heard that, her smile lit up and she vowed to make him a whole lot more to munch. After they scarfed down their meal, Haiji slammed down the moment and shouted that it was back to work. Krull and Sue fired up instantly, fists up, and screamed their cheers in perfect unison. Several days later, Hoggy and his elf apprentice kept hammering in the forge, and that rhythmic clang on steel rang through the whole place. The apprentice stared at her brand-new knife, then swung the moment into action. She turned the whole thing into a business pitch. "Why stop at knives? We can crank out swords, too." He watched her work in silence, nodding because her blade crafting was seriously top tier. Right as his thoughts started to race, a bigger problem hit. Filma was late for her delivery and he blurted it out loud. The apprentice immediately volunteered to go check, but the moment he did, Sue burst up from behind a crate of finished blades, grinning, proudly saying she'd helped forge 100 knives and thanking Cruel for the help. He spun away, drowning in his own thoughts, and he was dead sure. Anything forged in his workshop would sell like wildfire. The apprentice chased his answer, and the moment she heard his certainty, she nodded along, cheering Sue, chiming right back with her own bold affirmations. Then were. The door slid open, and everyone snapped their heads toward it. A horse-drawn cart had rolled in, and there stood a flustered Larsa, bowing so deep as she blurted out apologies for being late. She insists she never wanted to be unreasonable. She was just trying to guide the one person who wanted to meet him, and Haiji, stunned, blurts out if he's really the guy they think he is. As he processes it all, the elf apprentice strides forward, eyes locked on the mysterious woman beside Felnel, and she snaps demands for her identity, while the armored elf swordswoman stays ice calm, quietly telling the apprentice not to take it out on the merchant. Then she steps forward, introduces herself as Fabian Belfair ***, and tells Haji to just call her *Bell ***. But Haji fumbles and repeats her full name like he's trying to fit it into his memory. The nickname lands like a slap. Cruel mutters that she can't stand her own name, claiming it's got zero cuteness, while Sue, the young cat-eared girl, quakes in terror and grips Haji's leg like he's the only shield from these strange people. Her fear doesn't scare Belfair away. It hooks her attention instantly. The swordwoman's eyes blaze when she says she's never seen a white wolf child before. Then affection takes over as she lunges and clamps Sue in a brutal, inescapable hug, swearing she's taking the kid home. Sue thrashes in sheer panic, muffled cries spilling out as Belfair clamps onto her and won't let go, while the elf nonchalantly comments on how strong the girl is for her tribe, until the apprentice spots Sue's terror and lunges forward, yelling at Belfair to stop, because she's clearly scaring the child. Hoggy jumps in, shouting for a Belfair to let the girl go, while Sue sobs, begging Hoggy to break the grip before it crushes her. With both the apprentice and Sue visibly shaken, Haji strides up and demands she stop, no hesitation. Belfair finally lets the girl go, tosses out a sloppy apology, and admits she can't resist anything cute. Then her eyes snap to Haji. She claims Filmel told her he's a knife master, so now she wants to inspect the sword he's gripping and judge its craftsmanship herself. She raised the sword high, her expert eyes running the blade from tip to hilt, and with a sharp, critical voice she said the chasing detail was just not up to snuff. He nodded along and then admitted it outright. Yeah, the blade's polishing was left a little rough on purpose. He said a real swordsman might feel that tiny snag as it bites into an arm, but that catch was the plan, not a mistake. And it's totally different from the smooth, clean edge a professional blade is built for. She snapped her own weapon into view, shoved the hilt toward him, and asked, "So, what do you think of this one?" inviting him to take a closer look. He snatched the sword from her, and the second his fingers clenched the hilt, a sharp click rang out, freezing his face in pure, stunned disbelief. His companions stayed back in the distance, watching sweat bead on his brow as his whole body stiffened like a statue. Two girls watched, dread creeping higher by the second. One flashed a cruel wave, demanding why Haji's face had drained of all color, while Sue pressed him with worried questions, frantic to know if he was okay. He trembled so hard he couldn't even look anyone in the eye. Head bowed low, he blurted out a heart-crushing apology, admitting with shaking guilt that he was probably the one who had forged this sword, only to have it shatter now. His words hit Belfair like a punch, and all he could do was blurt, "Are you really admitting you're inexperienced?" Haiji's chest tightened with anguish. Yeah, it was true. His own immaturity had been hammered into him by the fire. He stood in stunned silence as his companions watched, while Belfair studied that cracked blade like it might confess something. Then she admitted it was far from perfect, but still a real sword. For 3 long years it had hacked its way through monsters, and she only grimly smiled at the truth that even the greatest blades are always bound to break one day. Her calm acceptance knocked the breath out of him. He'd been treating her like a monster in his head for that unreal strength and steel-hard composure. But the second the words hit him, he scrambled and begged her to just forget his outburst. She just met his eyes with a soft, steady smile, calm as can be, telling him that no matter what happened, his swords were still damn good. That praise lit Filnel up with pure adrenaline, and she couldn't believe it. He'd actually won the approval of the infamous Purple Lightning Spellfair. But Hoggy just stood there, frozen, his mind scrambling to accept it. A legend like that had been swinging one of his own creations. His disbelief exploded into a blunt question, right from the elf swordswoman herself. asking if he truly hadn't been the one who forged her blade, and he could only freeze there, staring in shock as he muttered her name over and over. She told him not to freak out, then casually admitted she'd been using his razor-sharp blades for ages. Then she dropped the real bombshell. She had a request for him. As she spoke, she whipped out a brand-new, flawless sword and declared it was the best steel in the entire Wurail kingdom. No swordsmith could touch him, not in a million years. She couldn't prove it for sure, but she was sure this blade was the one, and then she revealed the truth. The very first look was at a cutting-edge model fresh from the kingdom's forges. He snapped back with a shout of disbelief, demanding to know if she was lying, if that really was the sword she claimed. Belfair didn't flinch, she just said, "If you believe it's so, then it is." He whips his gaze away, cheeks burning, because the memory of that blindingly crafted sword crashes into his mind. Belfair says she'd already guessed it was the Wurail Kingdom's world-famous blade. Haiji mutters under his breath, and it clicks that he was right back then, too. She slams into his thoughts and drives the sword at his chest, declaring, straight to the point, that this is exactly why she's asking. She needs him to forge a sword for her and only her. As she talks, one tear slips from her left eye and carves a warm path down her cheek, while her stare stays razor-sharp and locked on. His focus snaps straight to the tear. He points at it instantly, eyes full of worry, and demands answers about her edge. She gently brushes the side of her face, then drops the bombshell. That eye isn't real, it's a prosthetic she got back when she was younger. He takes in the shock and his face tightens. Then he spits the truth. This world isn't gentle like Japan, it's crawling with beasts and demons, and survival means fighting. He grabs the point and asks straight out, "So you're saying if her blade snaps, she's basically doomed?" "Right." He angles away a little, resolve rock solid, and flatly says he never forges weapons to murder people. Then Belfair's face crumples with heartbreaking sadness. Her sadness crumbles fast, replaced by a blazing, determined smile. Then she blurts out that she wants a sword to protect him. Haiji freezes, staring as she reaches out her hand, and when he finally speaks, he thanks her and drives home the moment with a firm shake of her armored hand, sealing their agreement for real. With his cruel companions circling in the forge and Sue watching from the doorway, Haiji snaps a headband tight around his forehead. Realizing a true Japanese sword will demand way more than a simple knife, at least 10 days. After sending Belfair back to the city, he braces himself for the grueling work ahead. His eyes narrow to a razor-sharp point, full of grit and resolve. He's ready to kick things off. He gestures at a heap of jagged, dark metal and demands the master blacksmith what it is. Then the craftsman reveals its tamahagin, a super-refined steel, and forging a knife from it means cranking the furnace to 1500 to 1600 degrees, almost twice the usual heat. Cruel and Sue hang on every word, burning with curiosity. This cruel woman puffs out her chest and flashes a confident grin, bragging that high-temperature work is her specialty. Then she tells him to let her handle it, so he doesn't miss out and eagerly volunteers to jump in and help with the cleaning. With his companion standing by, Haiji drops to his knees at the anvil across from the master blacksmith. Then they slam into the glowing metal together, their synchronized strikes roaring as sparks explode through the workshop. When the master blacksmith snatches up that cooled, lumpy mess from his first hammering, what he calls tamaroshi, he hurls the metal straight back into the blazing forge until it burns white-hot, ready to be forged into something real. It keeps guiding the process. Now the flattened steel has to be smashed apart. The top pieces are picked and stacked, wrapped in paper, and then drenched in a sticky mix of straw, ash, and clay water before it gets shoved back into the furnace for another round of heat. Hot steel gets slammed flat, folded over, then hammered again and again. Each round drives out more impurities until it's nearly pure, and with every fold they dust on fresh straw ash before dropping the metal back into the blazing forge. He wipes the sweat off his brow, the forge heat blasting like a furnace as he gleams, and right beside him, those cruel mirrors just amplify the grind. She smirks with pure determination, ready to swing again. She lets out a powerful scream and slams a heavy sledgehammer down onto the glowing steel he's gripping tight. Boom! The impact ricochets through the whole workshop. He even pauses just to spit out those cruel remarks. Making human weapons is brutal work, isn't it? And the blacksmith nods, saying Japanese swords are even worse, because they've got to layer and forge the metal over and over again until it's relentless. Her curiosity hit maximum heat when she saw how hard he pushed. So she spun toward him and demanded to know why he was so dead set against forging a sword for Haiji first. He stares into the forge flames and fires the question right back at her, asking if she's jealous that he's the one forging the weapon. Then Cruel snaps it down fast, insisting she doesn't care one bit. Meanwhile, Haiji hones his skills somewhere else, slashing through drills with a wooden sword, itching to find out how strong he's really become. Then his eyes lock onto a rapier, the same one he once forged for Belfair, and it hits him hard. He wants to test what he can craft with his own two hands now. At the forge, the master blacksmith finally drops the truth about why he's been pushing so hard. This forge hides a mysterious power, and he's convinced that if they team up, they can forge a sword so incredible it'll leave them speechless. His face lights up with near-manic delight, and he blurts out that this is the most fun he's ever had. His love for the craft has roared back to life at full fever, turning every forge into pure joy. He froze in stunned silence because at last his work was done. While the forge sat quiet, it showed off the finished blade like a trophy, and right beside him, Cruel and Sue stared back in pure, blown-away shock. On a display stand right in front of them sat the fruit of their blood, sweat, and nightmares, and the moment hit like a drumbeat. It was finally done. That blade was a pure masterpiece. Its polished steel flashed like lightning under the lights. Cruel couldn't hold back, yelling that it was incredible, and Sue nodded hard, calling it beautiful. Her awe snapped into sharp curiosity, and Cruel pushed the idea that Haiji should try a test cut. Sue immediately jumped in and backed it without hesitation. He took their advice and hunted outside, then stopped in front of a hulking tree as the fresh sword sat heavy and sharp in his hands, cruel purpose burning in his grip, while Sausch yelled encouragement from safety far away. He slashed with the blade, and boom, it hit him. It was ridiculously light. Then a giant tree came crashing down, and Cruel shouted his name in panic. That brutal slash hit with a snap of force, only for the weapon to feel weirdly light in the hand. So he flew down hard onto the grass, groaning on impact, while Cruel and Sue sprinted over, hovering close and demanding, "Are you okay?" He stared at the new katana, and a bead of sweat slid down his temple, until it hit him, pure awe exploding in his chest. He'd forged a weapon so unreal it didn't even feel like it belonged in this world. A few days later, the elf swordswoman Belfair showed up with a knowing grin and greeted him and his crew like she'd been waiting forever, because she had. Belfair shot back an apology for the delay, but the real message was loud. His latest work had him brimming with confidence. Haiji nodded instantly, backed her up without a second thought, and said the course was exactly as promised before urging her to come see it right now. She slipped inside behind him, and there it was, the katana sitting on a display stand. When Belfair finally lifted it, shock ripped through her as the truth hit her senses. Philnal Larsa's reaction snapped Belfair to attention. He blurted that without a real appraisal, the rank was a total mystery, but Belfair couldn't stop staring at how insanely good it was. He stammered that it had to be a rank, maybe even an S rank. She gripped the blade steady as if her life depended on it, and she couldn't help thinking it was way heavier than she ever expected. As she swung for practice, she suddenly felt how shockingly light the blade moved, and a real smile burst onto her face. She spun to Hoggy and asked if he wanted to see a test cut. He didn't hesitate and eagerly said yes. Belfair planted herself in front of a mountain of iron ingots as thick as a grown man's torso, and Haiji stared like, no way this can get cut. Yet with Belfair's precision, his blade behind her, and that razor-sharp breath leaving her lungs, her swing finally crashed into it. They slammed the blade downward in one swift, razor-clean swing, driving straight for the stack of solid iron ingots. The katana carved straight through the metal like it was nothing, and with one clean, effortless slash, she split the whole stack in two. Impossible feats left everyone cruelly stunned. Fimmel and Sue just stood there, mouths gaping in total disbelief. Haiji just stared, stunned by the sheer force of his own creation, and then Belfair spun toward him, her voice brimming with real admiration as she praised his skill. Her cheeks stayed touched with that soft blush as she smiled, and said the sword really was his strength made visible. Just then, Belfair admitted she'd been holding back in their duel, because the truth hit her hard. If he'd fought with everything, he could have cut her down. With a deep, respectful bow, she thanked him like it was the most important thing in the world. Then the moment hit Haiji full force. Still stuck on her words and that sword's insane performance, he could only swallow hard and force out a response. Watching the back and forth, the master blacksmith snapped in, voice roaring with pride. Then he told them straight. Sure, every sword eventually breaks, but he wouldn't take a single coin because this whole mess was born from the blade he forged failing in the first place. She pushed Belfair to take the money back, but Philnell cut in fast, reminding the swordswoman of her rule, never bail on a job halfway. So Belfair paused, swallowed her doubt, and came back with a fresh deal. 30 gold coins for the materials. She snaps away the payment like it's an insult, saying the price is way too low, because even the simplest things from the royal palace cost 100 gold coins. With a straight face, she challenges him. What do you call fair for your work? Haiji grips his gleaming katana and fires back that he only priced the materials. His casual brush-off of his own work leaves her frozen like she can't breathe. She blurts out in disbelief, asking if he's really trying to get paid by her. And when he sees that shock hit her face, he leans in and fires back. Wait, are you mad at me? What? She won't answer. Her face stays unreadable. And then he steps in with a blunt, serious request, demanding Belfair teach him the sword art. He leads them into an open field, and there, Cruel and Sue are already waiting. He tells them straight up that he handed the Kaguchi blade to Belfair, and his real plan is to get strong enough to protect his family no matter what. He keeps talking, fired up by the logic that if he could survive, and even level up, in that forest, then swordsmanship should be next, too. Right as he's speaking, Belfair slips a little farther away from the group. She spins around to face him, a sly little smile lighting her lips, then challenges him to a mock battle, straight up. Hoggy freezes, caught off guard, and when he hesitates, Belfair locks in and insists they start right now, even as Hoggy blurts out that he's totally brand new at this. Her face turns stone serious again. She admits proper form matters, but you only truly understand its weight when you've lived through a real fight. She snaps into position with her katana and tells him, "Don't worry, you won't be able to unleash your full power right from the start." Haiji exhales a long sigh and just accepts the surprise lesson. A faint, knowing smile curled her lips, and then, voice low and steady, she started talking. In a wide, grassy clearing beside a plain little building, a training session is about to kick off. Haiji stands face to face with the elf swordswoman, Belfair, while Cruel keeps his eyes on them, and Sue and Film hang back safely in the distance, ready to watch. The three of them lock in, bracing for what's next. Belfair raises her blade with battle-ready ease. Hoggy tightens his grip with pure resolve, and Cruel keeps a calm, razor-alert watch. On the sidelines, their cheers explode through the air. Sue shoots a cheerful wink while Filnal flashes a supportive smile, and both of them pump their fists as they shout for Hoggy to give it everything he's got. In the heart of the clearing, Belfair flashes him a smug, confident smirk, while Haiji's whole body tightens, sweat beading on his brow as he grips his sword like he's bracing for impact. She snaps the silence, straight up asking him whether he'd rather charge as the attacker or stand his ground as the defender. And AG looks totally thrown off, but she presses on, reading his reactions like a tell, saying it's crystal clear he leans defensive. He's left staring at her, shocked by how right she feels. She's willing to let it go, until she calmly tells him his body just moved on its own. Accepting it, she grins and declares her attack is starting now. His eyes shoot wide as he sees her lunge straight for him. Steel screams through the air. Hoggy snaps into defense at once, blocking a crushing strike with a sharp parry. The impact hammers his bones, killing intent rolls off her like a storm, and he can't help but wonder if his hero's growth skill is the only reason he can even move in time. Even with the pressure bearing down, Belfair says he's starting to get the hang of the pace, and with a sneaky grin, she tells them to crank it up a notch. AG's face snaps into pure panic as he stammers, begging her to stop and wait. He strained under the impact, fingers clenched so hard around his sword it hurt, because her attack came at a whole other level, faster and heavier than anything he'd faced. And from below, Belfair's voice cut up to him, praising him for handling that hit. Even with him fighting for every inch, she seized the opening and drove it home, eyes locked on his like a blade, daring him to admit he could still keep going. A brutal surge slammed into him, and a grimace twisted his face as he realized, if this kept up, they'd shove him back and drop him before he could even lift a finger. He knew he couldn't last, so his eyes snapped around, hunting for one opening. He had to stay locked on her every move and strike at the exact moment, shifting his focus from her right knee to her left, ready to pounce. Sensing the opening he craved, he surged forward with a silent shout, slamming into her and locking his arms around her waist. Her tackle landed, but it didn't rattle her one bit. She just stayed calm, stared down at him, and said that on a battlefield, toppling your opponent is what decides the fight. In the blink of an eye, she flipped the whole fight. Suddenly, he was face down on the ground, her dagger's cold edge pressed to his throat. "Stop!" he blurted, throwing in defeat. Belfair nodded to his surrender and even praised how clean his moves had been, right up until she nailed him with that tackle. Hoggy froze in place, utterly baffled. Then he admitted that when she shoved him down, he'd figured she'd go for the kill, and he even blurted out whether all dark elves were like that. Belfair just grinned, warm and steady, and told him no, not at all. He erupts in a roar of frustration, flings his hands up, and collapses on the ground, completely beaten. Sue and Cruel watch from the sidelines, and they're blown away. Sue cheers that Haiji is a total beast with a sword looking downright cool, and Cruel jumps in with the same excitement, while Philonel stays quiet, clocking that he's just mirroring Belfair's moves. Belfair spits out cruel remarks, bragging it's still an incredible sight even if she can't catch the final move. Then Haiji pushes himself up to his feet, and Belfair glares over, asking if he finally understands that it's time to cross swords. Now stripped of his armor, Haiji can only freeze, eyes wide and empty, sweat pouring down his face as the crushing defeat finally crashes into his head. Cruel cuts in and tells him she's been sure from the start. He's way stronger than he realizes. Most normal people can't even come near her, the holy dragon. Belfair jumps in and says the dragon-level aura of Delita is so brutal it knocks a normal person flat before they can even get close. Then she turns serious and declares that Haiji's power is dangerously near an A-rank swordsman. The verdict hits him like a punch. He can't even speak. He stares at his own hand, wondering if he really deserves that rank. She tells him straight up, he can't climb that height because he's the one choking his own power. Then she holds out a sword in its sheath and dares him to try believing in himself harder. Heiji just freezes, staring at the blade as her words hammer through his head. He stared back at his past, the days when he was just a regular salaryman in modern Japan, before he got ripped into this world as a decorative hero, convinced his power was nothing but useless decoration, doing whatever they said without ever daring to question it. But there he stood, and Cruel, Philnell, and Sue watched him with soft, steady looks. Then Cruel cut in, insisting his own judgment was totally wrong. His resolve hardened. He clenched the sword at his side and declared a Belfair vow, promising himself he'd believe in his own strength a bit more. Belfair snapped back, saying it wasn't about trying. Then she instantly changed gears, asking him what the name was of the fine blade he was gripping, and pushing him to have real confidence in wielding a masterpiece like that. He shot his finger up at the sky and, with a brand new certainty, declared he'd already picked the name. Belfair stared at him, surprise flickering across her face. He christened the blade *Suckyu, Azure Sky ***, because its power felt endless, stretching wide like the heavens themselves, and Belfair grinned, nodding like, yeah, that's a perfect name for your new sword. His gaze snapped to Belfair, and he blurted out that her blue eyes looked just like the sky that day, an unexpected compliment that left her frozen, eyes widening in shock. She started to shake out of nowhere, all flustered and panicking, blurting that she couldn't handle it anymore, while Haiji just stared, totally baffled, and asked what was wrong. Swamped by pure emotion, she lunges in and wraps her arms around Haiji, smashing his face into her chest as she blurts out that he's insanely cool, while Haiji, totally blindsided, can't even process what's happening. He freezes in disbelief, wondering if she's really talking about him, and she jumps in without hesitation, buzzing with excitement. You're exactly my type, cool, kind, and insanely strong. Then she admits she's been hunting for someone just like him for ages. Her cheeks burned red, her breaths coming in loud, shaky bursts. She stared him down and asked, right there, if he'd be her partner. Right as everything spikes into chaos, Cruel barges in and yanks Haiji away from the elf like ripping a blade from its sheath. Then the moment she does, she snaps that Belfair bring Haiji back, roaring that he's her master. An intense rivalry explodes between them, and Belfair and Cruel lock gazes, tension snapping in the air like lightning. As the two square off, Sue lunges forward and snaps that Cruel is nothing but sly, but Belfair just smiles and says, if that's true, then I'm Haji's sword master. Cruel fires back, nope, I'm Haji's partner. As the argument spirals out of control, Philmel snaps to the shocked Haji and blurts that things have turned wild in seconds, while Haji just gapes, utterly stunned by what's happening. As their bickering keeps echoing in his ears, he snaps his gaze to the sky and wonders, what on earth did his life turn into? Now that their rivalry was finally on full blast, Belfair's exit was basically inevitable. She waved from her rattling carriage, flashed a confident grin, and swore she'd make sure the soak she'd gotten didn't go to waste. With the scowling, Cruel type and cheerful Sue beside him, he waved back hard, right as she kicked off her journey. As they watched her vanish, Haiji tossed out that Belfair felt like a genuinely good person. Then Sue shot him a sharp look and blurted, so you're into women like her, and immediately got hit with a savage, sideways glare from Cruel. Heat surged into his face, a sweat slicked his brow, and he stammered so hard he couldn't even piece together a real denial. Totally overwhelmed, he spun around and bolted out of that awkward mess, while Cruel raged after him, yelling that he was running away, and Sue shouted for him to stop and wait. Meanwhile, in a nearby town, a young swordswoman in armor sat alone at her table, staring off with a heavy, worried look. Her lonely calm got shattered the second Belfair showed up, barking at her for being late. The swordswoman, Belfair's master Belphibia, looked totally rattled, insisting Belfair was the real master, not her. Belfair waved it off and told her to drop the formalities. She'd been warned a bunch of times to call her Belle and stop acting so stiff. She pressed harder, demanding to know why Belphibia was clinging to stubborn denial when the folks back in her hometown had caved so easily. Except the moment she asked, Belphibia went completely blank, staring in confusion as she tried to figure out what hometown Belfair even meant. She freezes at that bizarre question, but Belfair just shakes her head and tells her master to drop it for now. Then he pivots and demands to know if she finally tracked down the sword she'd been hunting. Belfair then pulls out a sword in its sheath, square guard and all, making it clear she really did find it. So she blurts out an apology like it was her fault it vanished. Belfair waves that off, saying it's mutual because she couldn't locate what she was searching for either. Her student's playful vibe doesn't slip past anyone. Belphibia straight up notices Belfair seems ridiculously happy today. With a bright little giggle, Belfair admits she just met someone really interesting, and now Belphibia can't help but stare at how wildly different her apprentices suddenly are. She keeps Belfair's words on her tongue and they hook her, because it reminds her of that earlier chat when Belfair called this fighter's style unrefined, amateurish, yet somehow still strangely effective. Belfair's teasing voice yanks her out of her reverie, telling her to quit staring so hard at people she finds fascinating, especially when they're swapping stories. And as Belphibia's cheeks burn with embarrassment, Belfair presses the point that it's okay if she's curious, but he can't stop worrying. Right then, someone nearby blurts in shock, demanding, "Wait, did you really do that?" Indukane's voice rings out as she tells Belfair this is a perfect match, and it's time to hit night training. Then the two start walking off. But just as they go, Belfair calls back and asks her master to wait, and once she's alone, that blush explodes across Belphibia's face as she realizes in her heart she's nothing like Kane. As evening rolls in, one lone star ignites over the twilight sky, blazing brighter with every heartbeat. With a dazzling, grin-splitting smile, Cruel calls out to Haji and declares she's found a weird-looking tree. Paul bursts into the workshop, and right away Haji pauses mid-swing with a hammer in hand. Sue stands beside him, silently watching. At the spot, Cruel eyed the tall, segmented stalks with a savage glare and snapped cruel remarks, swearing she'd never seen a plant like this before, her curiosity exploding the moment she laid eyes on it. Hagi slips into the group, lifts one of the stalks and declares, "This is bamboo." Then rambles that it's everywhere back in his world and the Cruel one can't help but shoot him a baffled look. He stared at the bamboo and it hit him. Hero summoning was an ancient magic, so maybe some seed from this plant had somehow latched onto a past hero's clothes, crossed into this world, and finally sprouted. With that plan locked in, he whirls to the others and declares it. He's using the bamboo to forge fishing rods. Cruel and Sue stare back, faces wiped clean, as Cruel blinks and barks, "Fishing." That tension evaporates into pure hype. Cruel can't hold back, blurting she wants in, and Sue shoots her hand up, yelling that she wants to try too. With that energy blasting off the charts, Haji leans in and asks if they're ready to go fishing. Next, they reach a calm river, crystal clear water rushing over smooth stones, while lush trees line the banks under a bright, open sky. With fishing rods in hand, the trio races to the riverbank, grins blazing. Cruel and Sue-chan especially thrilled for the fishing trip ahead. All three rocking fresh new summer outfits Phil hooked them up with. He starts prepping the gear, then tells them the setup is finally done. Cruel and Sue crouch in the shallows, staring hard as he lines everything up. Throws down the bait and their faces light up, because they're giddy at the idea of reeling in a mountain of fish with it, while Sue Stare's eyes go wide, already picturing every single catch. Their lines hit the water and the bobber just drifted, calm, quiet like the world paused, while the whole group sank into waiting silence. More time drags by with zero luck. Cruel stretches into a huge yawn while Sue grumbles that they've caught nothing at all, and then Cruel snaps that it's all that thing's fault, leaving Haji staring like, "What thing?" She tells them something huge is lurking under the water's surface, and it's scaring every other fish off. Then, deep down, a dark, shadowy figure rises with two glowing eyes, proving she's right. With her patience spent and helpless, she snaps, "I'll do it myself," and a bow of raw energy forms in her hands. Then, in the blink of an eye, the river detonates into a towering column of water with a roar that shatters the air. She plants her feet in the middle of the pouring chaos, bow still locked in her grip, and screams, "How was that?" Behind her, soaked to the bone, Haji and Sue just sit on the riverbank, utterly stunned, completely speechless. The blast leaves a colossal, scaled beast drifting dead on the river, and Haji's jaw drops as he realizes it looks like it's been stripped to the bone. Then he can't believe how fast it all happened. As they come into view, savage jets of water explode up, soaking them to the bone. While underwater, an irritated Sue clocks the danger and realizes one wrong surge of emotion, and her transformation will give her away. He softly pats the crying Cruel on the head, murmurs that the creature was probably the river's master, and tells her not to worry. She was only fishing and couldn't have known it was a trap. So Sue watches him with a worried look and whispers his name. Her face hardens with grit. She clenches her fists, declares she'll catch that creature, and demands they build a fishing rod strong enough to handle the job. After she pours her heart out, the whole crew bursts into the master blacksmith's workshop. He hears their request and leans in to tell Krull that making something like that would be a nightmare without the right materials. Soft iron might work, but it's far from ideal. Krull drinks in every word, eyes locked, like she finally gets the real problem. His words hit Haiji like a jolt. His eyes fly wide as he shoots down the thought that they're missing what they need under his breath. He remembers every day of training he's lived for, and he braces for the moment he finally gets to forge his own steel. He flashes back to the sword Belfair made for him, and to the time he demanded, "Teach me how to make soft iron too." Then it hits this becomes his new purpose. He tightens his fist, sure it's worth the risk. He gently ruffled Cruel's head, and she winked at him, praising his advice and asking if he'd finally cracked the answer. Plans locked in, he kicked the job off, and the ambulance erupted into sparks. Cruel slammed a heavy sledgehammer down with brutal force, while he, now dressed in an apron and headband, quietly handled the delicate details like a master at work. As he worked, his focus snapped into place, and out of nowhere, a memory from the royal palace crashed back in. They taught him that a blacksmith's real power isn't magic, it's something way more important. He remembered his hooded instructor leaning in and saying, "Talent and knowledge help, but there's one thing you can't ever drop." Because when it comes to magic, the most important piece was the one he had to remember. The lesson hit hard. Picture the outcome before it ever shows up. Then right there in the present, sweat dripped down his brow, the answer snapped into place, and he clenched that metal tight, pouring his will into it until it turned soft iron. His iron focus paid off. Outside the workshop, he hauled his brand-new fishing rod back and smashed a cast so perfectly it snapped through the air with flawless flex, while Cruel and Sue watched, stunned. Their eyes snapped wide in sync, blazing with pure shock and joy as they finally laid eyes on the completed creation. She exploded into cheers, arms stretched wide, gushing that the rod bent and swayed like it was alive, while Cruel stood right beside her, staring in disbelief as she watched an iron weapon flex just like bamboo. Her shock snapped into action. She straight up said they only needed one thing now, a fishing line, and she already had the perfect plan for it. She plucked one shimmering strand of her hair and pressed it into Haiji's hands, and when he inspected the rod, a grin spread, because it looked like her hair would fit it perfectly. Once that line was locked in, Cruel grinned and swore they could finally reel in the river's master. Revenge time. Their focus snapped to the river as the water's surface started to churn. Something huge was gliding beneath, close enough to shake the whole current. Moments later, the pitch-black, scaled back of a massive fish broke the water, and right from the shore, everyone shouted, "We found the one." The creature was absolutely colossal, and its massive body tore through the water with relentless, unstoppable purpose. Haiji dug in his stance, snapped the rod forward, and whipped out a fishing line with a hard flick of his wrist. He swore the bait came alive the moment it hit the river, splattering in with a flash, then spreading tiny ripples across the water like a signal. Then he set to work, winding the reel on his fishing rod. While under the water, a bunch of smaller fish kept cruising, totally clueless as the lure drifted down from above. From the riverbank, Krull and Sue stared in awe. Krull swore the bait was swimming, and Sue gasped that it looked just like a real fish. From the depths, a colossal shadow erupted into view. Then a whiskered maw snapped open and swallowed the bait in one crushing gulp, blasting a brutal shockwave straight up the line that the summoned man felt instantly. The rod buckled hard as that massive force yanked him forward, the water raging and foaming around him, and Haiji stared in stunned disbelief. So this was the real power of their quarry. The summoned man clenched his jaw, awed by the brutal pull, and exhaled in relief when he saw the rod was still somehow holding. He dug his heels into the soft earth, muscles screaming as the creature yanked him hard. Then the ground crumbled under his feet, and he realized he wasn't just struggling anymore, his body was getting dragged. Even with his whole body fighting back, they dragged him forward, right as the world tried to yank him off his feet. Then Cruel and Sue barreled in, hooking their hands onto his back and arms to pin him in place. Raised by his companions, he burst out for Cruel and Sue to help, then screamed for Dorita by name. before turning to the stunned Haiji and shouting that if he just stayed patient, a delicious reward would come his way later. He grunts as the rope line snaps tight, and that weird, segmented lure whips through the air like a living trap. Then he realizes there's no way he can drag it alone, so he yells for everyone to pull with him. Sue and Cruel waste no time, rushing in to grab on and add their strength. With one sharp cry, they heave with everything they've got, and the river's surface erupts in a violent burst of spray. The river's master blasts up from the depths like a horror movie. An absolutely monstrous catfish rises, and the shockwave of its eruption hurls the trio backward. But they cling on, teeth gritted. And all the summoned man and Sue can do is stare in total disbelief at the colossal beast they've hooked. After he crashes onto the ground, he blurts out whether his companions are okay. Then Cruel, rubbing the bump on her head, grumbles about the hit, but confirms she's fine, and so is Sue. Their eyes snap back to the giant beached fish. Cruel can't help but gawk at its insane size, while Summonman wheels around, scans the area, and demands to know where Hoggy went. From over there, Haiji keeps his eyes on everything and mutters to someone you can't see that they actually nailed it, then shuts down any talk of close call like, nah, this win was all them, all their own power. Back on the riverbank, the whole crew wastes no time, everything's set. That giant catfish gets wrapped in big leaves and laid over a fire pit, while Sue and Cruel hum a happy tune. Then Sue breaks into a cheerful cry and declares their meal is finally ready. The river's monster is finally cooked to perfection. Cruel crows with ruthless joy, claiming the river master is roasted whole, and she and Sue gasp at the jaw-dropping feast, eyes shining like they can't wait for what comes next. She erupts in hearty laughter and tears into a big bite of the cooked fish, while the cat-eared girl beside her munches with puffed cheeks, her words swallowed by the food. Then the summoned man nearby leans in, warning her to watch out for bones. With a bright smile, she cheers for Haiji, thanking him and calling the meal amazing. He stays off to the side, bites into his own share, and thinks to himself that eating fish they all caught together is the whole dream of a slow, peaceful life, something he never would have guessed he'd find in this other world. Her face is pure bliss, eyes squeezed shut as she savors another huge bite of freshly cooked fish, totally swept up in the simple magic of eating. Under a half-clouded sky, a thick, unstoppable force surges across the land. As he heads through the woods, Haiji warns her not to run too hard or she'll trip and tumble. With a bright grin, she waves it off and tells him she'll be fine. Her confidence evaporates the second she stumbles, pitches forward, and nearly face-splints. Haiji snaps her name in a panic. He comes barreling to her side, slaps a hand on her head, and blurts out, panicked, asking if she's okay and whether anything hurts. But from the ground she insists she's totally fine. She springs to her feet, jabs at something she spotted, and screams his name. Then he snaps his head up in total shock because she's uncovered some mushrooms. There are two kinds of mushrooms in the mix. One's a pale yellow that's nicknamed for looking exactly like egg yolk, and the other is dark as almost black that tricks you by looking just like a deadly poisonous kind. Sue proudly lifts up one of each and nails the Tamagoro dake and the Dokumadoki dake. But Haiji immediately shakes his head, still totally lost, because he can't tell them apart at all. He lets out a faint smile, because for someone like Sue from the White Wolf tribe, Sen alone makes the difference painfully clear, so he's mulling it over when she calls his name again. While the others scavenged, Cruel erupted in a triumphant cry, holding up the gigantic mushroom she'd unearthed all on her own. She held it up for everyone to gawk, grinning at how massive it was, then blurted, "What kind of mushroom even is that? Is it some kind of demon beast?" Right before anyone could even speak, a vicious howl tore through the air and snapped Haiji's attention. He spun around as two huge, wolf-like show hounds with dark manes burst from the trees, snarling like they owned the night. The hounds exploded forward with zero hesitation, dark fur and razor claws streaking straight at the little group. But just as the beast barreled toward them, 3 White Wolf tribe members lunged in and slammed the attack back. So when Sue spotted them, her relief burst out as she recognized their faces, shouting for her mother and father. Her parents burst into the scene and crushed her in a tight embrace, and Haiji froze there, stunned. Then he blurted out how they even knew to show up, while Sue's mother just confirmed she was okay. He spun toward her parents, eyes locked and face set in stone, and then he dropped the bombshell he'd just learned. The White Wolf tribe was getting hit hard too, because the Ashu hounds were suddenly multiplying their attacks. Surya, Sue's mom, looked like she might break, and when her father, Igal, confirmed it, the fear in the air turned real. Haiji froze in shock and blurted out if those beasts were really that terrifying. They all warned that, sure, they're formidable, but the pack leader right now is a nightmare, since a night raid left several of their own gravely hurt. While the cruel one kept Sue in his grip, he stared off and thought, if this were a dragon, I'd have a chance to beat it, but fighting in the forest. Haji's face tightens as that multi-tailed Ashuhound leader flashes back in his mind. And when he finally spots the beast for what it is, cold recognition sparks in his eyes. While Sue grapples with it, her parents hit her with the full nightmare. Surya, her mother, staring at her with raw worry as she explains the creatures have been raiding their food and supplies. And Igal, her father, grimly warns that the hound's claws and fangs are brutally sharp. Its strikes are lightning fast, and worst of all, it's no longer hunting solo. It's moving like a coordinated pack. He stares down at Sue, and she looks up at him with trembling hope, so he clenches his fist and steels himself. Because that hound is a debt he can't ignore, and he's going to help. Igal's shocked by the silent offer, so he presses. Are you sure? Haji locks eyes with him, nods, and vows he'll forge defensive gear for them. With Cruel and Sue standing right beside him, he steps up and formally tells the tribe, the nightmares of this forest are ours now. Then he bows and offers his help, praying he can be useful at least a little. Relief and pure joy crashes across Agal, Surya, and every White Wolf member watching, ears snapping up together as they pour out heartfelt gratitude and latch onto their hopes, trusting him with everything. Later, Eagle shows you what's really wrong. He stomps forward in heavy, clanking plate armor and tells the White Wolf tribe the truth. Their power lives in mobility, not in dragging around bulky gear, and with a dull thud, he sets down a heavy gauntlet to make sure everyone gets the message. Inside the forge, Haiji, now in a plain work apron, snatches up the gauntlet and studies it hard, nodding along with Gaul's judgment, saying he actually stumbled on the set while cleaning the workshop. And sure, regular armor is heavy and built like a tank, but he's going to forge something else, lighter, different, and made for speed. He kicked things off by showing off a wild-looking tool called a drawing die, an expert piece of gear that forces metal rods through pressure, reshaping them by plastic deformation. He snapped the device into place and told them what it was for. Sue stared at it and thought it was just some gambling dice, but Haiji leaned in and corrected her fast, insisting it wasn't that at all and telling her to sit back and watch what happens. With the whole operation hanging on her strength, Cruel shot forward without hesitation. Haiji shoved the end of a metal rod into her hands, buried in the die, and told her to yank with everything she had. Cruel flashed a confident grin and went for it. She shot into action without hesitation, muscles snapping tight as she yanked with brutal strength, while Hoggy slammed a lever to hold the whole apparatus steady. Sue stared in stunned silence as their massive iron rod glided through the die under her incredible strength, growing thinner with every smooth pull, while Haiji went, "Yep, now we'll run it again and again through smaller and smaller holes." He stared at the finished result, an insane bundle of hair-thin metal threads. Sue couldn't stop staring, stunned by how far this had been transformed, and Hage finally said it was a metalworking technique called drawing. Now that the raw materials were finally ready, Haiji faced Sue's parents, Egil and Surya, and said, "Next step needs the White Wolf tribe. Get everyone together fast." Right after his request, the whole tribe surged into place and piled onto a giant mat. Haji, Cruel, and Sue right there too. Then they teamed up to start weaving the brand new metal wires, hands moving in a tense, intricate rhythm. He shouts for the tribe to cinch iron wire tight around a metal rod, then slice the finished coil into separate rings. Obeying his orders, the whole White Wolf tribe, Cruel included, races into action, slicing through the coils until a massive pile of tiny metal rings starts to grow. Sue beams with proud joy as she thrusts a huge handful of finished rings into your hands, bragging that she made so many, her little hands practically bursting with the results of all her hard work. Her mom, Surya, studies her with this warm, gentle look, clearly seeing how hard Sue is pushing herself because she wants to be useful to everyone. And then Haiji leans in asking if she's having fun. Sue lights up and shouts that she totally is. He grins as he gently pats her head and murmurs, letting her feel every bit of his understanding. And seeing that whole side of the tribe unite with that kind of spirit is honestly the most heartwarming thing. After weeks of pure grind, the moment you've been chasing finally hits. The project is complete. Egil holds up the finished shirt, metal rings linked together like a living chain, and Haiji snaps. "That's chainmail." Egil can't believe it, marveling at how unbelievably light it is and how much easier it makes him move than plate armor. He tells them that this armor won't slow down the White Wolf tribe, that it's a simple shield, but it's built to shrug off the Asherhound's attacks, and if they want proof, they should test it for real. He squared up in front of the wooden dummy, rocking a brand new prototype chainmail shirt, while Surya stared at him with bated breath, pushing. "Tell me you're really ready for me to land one full power hit." In the blink of an eye, she surged forward like lightning, and then, wham, her mighty chop tore through the air. Her husband, Egil, snapped up his hands to shield his face, not able to bear watching it land. The strike snapped through with a brutal crack, right in front of Haiji, Sue, and Cruel, who couldn't stop staring. Egil dropped his hand, eyes bulging in pure disbelief. The thick log was split clean in half, but the chainmail underneath came through untouched. And even Surya herself, gasped, shocked that the armor had just swallowed her full-force hit like it was nothing. All his doubt crumbled, and Egil whipped around to Hagi, grinning like a kid who just struck gold, praising the armor as the key to finally going up against the Asu hounds. Then Hagi nodded in agreement, warning them they still had to forge enough armor for the whole tribe to take on the packs. Carrying the moment on his shoulders, Haiji whipped the crowd into action, roaring for everyone to start production right now. Then the whole White Wolf tribe, with Cruel and Sue right beside them, slammed their fists up in a thunderous, no-turning-back cheer. With morale blasting through the tribe, they got to work. Haji pounding an anvil, hammering metal rings into shape while Cruel fought alongside him, and across the camp other groups huddled together, carefully piecing together the armor piece by piece. The training never stopped. Surya huddled with the other warriors, weaving the rings together with razor-quick hands, and even young Sue jumped in, threading those metal loops with fierce, focused care. Piece by piece, the chain mail sections piled up, and every linked sheet screamed, "We can do this," in bright, brand-new hope. With the mass production finally finished, the White Wolf tribe's warriors line up as one, all wearing freshly forged chainmail on their skin. Egil stands forward, checks every last fighter is geared up, and the whole tribe erupts in one thunderous shout of yes. Then he whips around to Haiji and bows so deeply it screams gratitude and respect. Egil even apologizes for the hassle, telling Haiji not to worry, because the mess in the forest is on their tribe to fix, but Haiji isn't buying it. He tilts his head up, sword draped over his shoulder, and declares, "I'm going with you." Then he asks, right to their faces, if he can borrow one of their hounds for the hunt, and that's when Egil freezes, shocked that Haiji plans to step into the fight himself. Just before the talk can move on, Cruel strides forward and declares, loud and clear, "I'm going too." Because as someone from Doldia, she refuses to stand back while everyone else risks their lives. Her bold declaration lights a fuse in Yangsu. He blurts out that he'll go right away. Meanwhile, Haiji stares down at the little girl, stunned as her tiny body unleashes this sudden, fierce determination. Her parents waste no time, blasting her with protests the second she speaks up. Surya warns it's too dangerous and orders her to wait like a good girl. But Sue snaps back, shouting that she's part of the White Wolf tribe and she's ready to fight alongside everyone else, while Haiji just stares at the heated clash, a bead of sweat creeping down his temple. Egil snaps his gaze onto her, face stone serious, and demands to know if she's truly ready to gamble her life on the battlefield. Sulak stands right behind him, doesn't flinch, and tells him yes, because she wants to save everyone. Their eyes snap into an unspoken standoff, Sue's gaze blazing with unstoppable determination, while her father's stare carries the crushing weight of the plea she's made. She softly whispers Haiji's name, her face staying serene as a gentle smile tugs at her lips, eyes closed like she's savoring the moment. Her father, Egil, erupts in fury and snaps that this is an absolute no. Haiji still stands his ground beside Cruel and Sue, calm as ever, telling Egil he gets why he's worried, but he and Cruel will keep her safe. Once her choice is crystal clear, she spins on her heel and strides off, leaving her mother and a fellow tribe member standing there as they watch her decide how to leave. A short time later, Egil strides right in front of the whole White Wolf tribe, points at the three behind him, and declares that Sue is with him, plus Haiji and Cruel, now firmly part of their family. Surya cheers that the pack is finally complete with these new additions, and then Egil steps in, commanding the air with his voice. He roars for the White Wolf warriors to shout with pride, strike with courage, and send the Ashu hounds fleeing from their forests. His words spark the crowd like fire, and the whole tribe explodes into one unified roar. Fists thrust into the air, determination crashing over them, and right there at the front, Egil officially declares war. The hero, the Cruel one, and Sue huddle on a jagged high ridge, their silhouettes blazing against the endless sea of dense forest dropping away below. The whole party is finally gathered, no stragglers, no doubts. At the center stands the hero, flanked by Gaul, Surya, and the other White Wolf warriors, all gripping themselves with grim, unshakable resolve, ready to unleash the hunt. Igal, the tribe's leader, keeps his face stone-cold and unshakable as the hero beside him glares with hard cruelty, staring straight ahead, because he knows they're not the only hunters stalking this territory. Suddenly his senses snap on. Egil blurts that she can smell an Asho hound and insists there's only one. Then the hero asks where it is and she cruelly points off in the distance, before pausing and admitting, no, there are two. With the discrepancies piling up, he snaps a small metallic tube up to his eye and extends it with a sharp click. Boom, it's a spyglass, built to let him see things miles away. He can't believe it. He blurts out, asking if the hero really sees that far. Then through the lens, the hero spots a lone, dark-furred creature slipping between the trees and declares, with total certainty, that it's an ashuhao. He lowers the device, and the seriousness hits his face like a switch, while Cruel keeps mocking him, saying his nose and ears aren't that great, until he shoots back that they're absolutely more than enough for what he needs. Sue leans in and giggles as she peeks through the spyglass, and the hero barks the order. They're going to track the hounds and uncover their leader. With their objective locked in, they move as one, boots pounding the dry earth, dust exploding up from the ground as they march off the ridge, dead set on pushing forward. They push deeper into the forest when Eagle stops dead and announces, "A Sioux hound's right nearby." He squints, drops a confident guess of 8 to 10 in a small pack, and the hero's face tightens as he demands, "Fine, but how far exactly?" He blurts out the math, wondering if it's roughly 400 meters, based on his 450 paces, then turns to Eggle and asks if this tight little group is really the leader's pack. Paul lays it all out. The hound packs run on a brutal chain of command. What they're hunting right now is just a minor side group under the main boss, who controls smaller teams, and each of those bosses then drives their own tiny units, stacking the whole thing into a tangled hierarchy. He pushes forward, then slams to a stop, because a fresh, horrifying sin has just found its way to him. He whips around at the hero, terror written all over his face, and bursts out that he's caught the scent of his own tribe, the White Wolves, and fears they've been taken, so he swears he has to rush to their aid right now, but the hero snaps. Wait. I'm gonna push them to move right now, because he just revealed the truth. The pack they're hunting is way bigger than we thought, like a whole army, and his friends need saving. Then Sue blurts out her father's name, packed with pure worry. When Eggle bolts, the hero whips around to Sue and says, "We're going after him." Sue answers with a fierce, unwavering nod. He sprints through the trees at insane speed, and when the hero and Sue finally give chase, he's hit with total shock at how brutally capable the White Wolf tribe is. He can barely keep up. He finally reached the scent source, an open mouth carved into the rock, staring into the dim light, and when he called out for a gall, his breath snagged in his throat. He couldn't wrap his head around why anyone from the White Wolf tribe would be here. The place that welcomed them was pure nightmare fuel. Inside the clearing, captured White Wolf tribe members huddled tight, trapped in a tight ring of snarling Asho hounds. Eggle stood over them, eyes razor narrow, and the truth hit him hard. It was a trap. Someone had lured his people right into this. The standoff exploded in an instant. Asho hounds snarled through their teeth and launched the attack from every side, springing toward the Gaul in a wild rush. Chaos detonated in an instant. One of the hounds tore out of the pack and launched straight at the hero, jaws gaping wide. Seeing the hero in danger, Eagle's face turned to cold fury, and he whipped around to smash his way in front of the threat. He shot forward like lightning, claws flaring, and one brutal swipe sliced clean through the hound's head, dropping it dead on the spot. The instant the threat got wiped out, the clearing detonated into a full-on brawl. Freed White Wolf tribe members rushed into a gull, their claws blazing as they slammed straight into the charging Asho hounds. In the chaos of fur and claws, the hero yanked Sue to the ground and snapped his arms over her head, just as the wild fight erupted all around them. While he could only stare helpless, as that Gaul and his tribe tore through their enemies at terrifying speed. He gasps, utterly worn out but victorious, because he shoved the last Asherhounds back. Boom, gone. Beside him, Sue lets out a breath of pure relief and tells him they got saved thanks to his gauntlets. Later, the squad crowds in to dissect the attack. Surya is stunned that the hounds would bait them with stolen goods and pelts, and the hero admits the move is way smarter than he ever guessed. Eggle, though, erupts with fury. If the hounds were going to pull something like this, they should have gone for a full, all-out assault, and he won't ever forgive them. Sue breathes out a frustrated sigh, knowing they're boxed in for good, then flashes a cocky smile and taps his temple like he's calling his shot. He tells them straight. Yeah, they might be outmatched in brute force, but humans don't fold when it comes to outsmarting the enemy. Several days later, his plan finally kicks off. He marches shoulder to shoulder with the Gaul and the rest of the White Wolf tribe, pushing through the forest like they've got one mission and no time to waste. Their target was the Asho hounds' hideout, tucked deep among the trees, while the whole pack slept peacefully, totally blind to the danger rushing in. Right outside the den, he clenches his fist and hardens his gaze with pure resolve. Egil watches him, and in that quiet moment, both leaders silently understand. With a thunderous shout, he screams the operation to life, and the entire White Wolf tribe erupts in one savage roar, charging down the slope straight for the startled pack. The clash erupts right away, brutal and loud. He snaps his gauntlet up to stop a hound mid-lunge, and the next second the Gaul and the other warriors crash into the pack at murderous speed, claws and blades ripping through their ranks. He lunges toward one of the eschew hounds that's clearly ready for a fight. Its lips curl like it's grinning, and then it hits him with a jolt. It's not smiling at him at all, it's laughing. Something deeper is going on here, and he can feel it. A vicious echo snaps through the forest. Haiji instantly knows it's a cruel signal. He whips around and sees her clutching her head, clearly falling apart, and the grim realization hits Egil's face the very same second. Surya roars for everyone to back up, right now, just like the plan said, and the second the crew hears him, they spin and bolt out of the den, launching their strategy on the spot. The eschew hounds tear into the hunt, paws hammering the forest floor as a distant hell bell screams the chase is on. Egil whips his head back, jaw tight and eyes blazing with tension. They slammed into the clearing, and Haiji's eyes widened. Right on cue, ambush was already there, waiting in the open. Igal watched over with Sue, and everything played out exactly the way Haiji had predicted. A trap snaps shut, a brutal yelp cuts through the air, and one of the hounds gets caught. Right then, Haiji barks that it's go time. With a thunderous command, the ground rips open into jagged earthen spikes, spearing several charging eschew hounds and slowing their rush. Then Haiji bellows for everyone to smash forward while the enemy is still reeling. Meanwhile, Cruel, the one who lured them in, stands alone in a different corner of the forest. Two eschew hounds skid to a stop in front of her, and when she demands why they aren't chasing her, one of the beasts snarls back. She spins back toward the two eschew hounds, grins, and taunts them to chase her deeper into the forest. Her taunts hit hard. Those hounds explode into a furious roar and charge at full speed. And the moment her grin slips, her eyes go wide with raw panic as she realizes she has to bolt right now. She rockets through the woods, and the beasts barrel in right on her heels, pounding the ground like thunder. As they tear through the clearing, both hounds suddenly slam their claws into the dirt, screeching to a violent stop. Their sudden halt freezes her in place, and when she whips around, confusion hits her hard. Those hounds just stop too, standing back and staring at her from afar. Before she even has time to process it, a blur tears through the air from the side, and one of the hounds gets slammed hard to the ground. The attacker is unmasked as Sue. She swings a massive weapon down with pure, unshakable rage. And once the beast drops, she whips her gaze to the dragon girl and shouts her name. She steps in and joins Cruel, who ruffles her hair, pats her head, and praises her for nailing that decoy perfectly. While the last eschew hound just glares at them, its partner already crushed. She praised Haiji to the skies, saying he'd done an amazing job luring the eschew hounds. Then Haiji smirked and corrected her, insisting the plan wasn't just them two. His words hit like a truth bomb, because when the whole plan finally unfolded, the last eschew hounds didn't have a single way out. They were boxed in on a clearing, pinned between Haiji's crew and a deadly line of White Wolf tribe warriors that had been waiting in ambush. With the enemy boxed in and his allies set, Haiji's face snapped into cold, grim focus. He declared the defense days were done, and now it was time to unleash the attack. Haiji leans in with everyone gathered around the table, slapping out a strategy on a game board. Use one poor soul as bait, lure the eschew hounds to a single spot, then ambush them. Igil, Sue's father, nods and calls it brilliant, but the real question, who's taking that bait, hangs there like a blade. Cruel voices raise the doubt, yet before anyone can claim the role, Sue shoots her hand up and eagerly volunteers. She slaps Haiji's chest with big confidence and blurts that she'll do it, while Haiji peers down at the little girl, staring at the doubt in his eyes like, "Are you really strong enough?" In the background, Cruel gets totally thrown off by how bold and sudden her offer is. Sue shoots her hand up, swearing she'll take the role, and Haiji immediately tries to talk her out of it, warning that playing the decoy is deadly, while Cruel backs him up, bluntly saying it isn't safe. Yet Haiji only drops his gaze, torn between worry and pure frustration at how stubborn she is. Playful smiles vanish in a blink, replaced by raw, fierce determination. And with eyes locked forward, she announces she's part of the White Wolf tribe and refuses to be a burden to them. His eyes widen as her intensity hits like a wave. Then he finally looks at her the way she deserves, clocking the steel in her resolve and realizing she means it. No games at all. After a beat, he caves and just says, "All right." Sue's face lights up with pure joy. She bursts forward, throws her arms around Haiji in a crushing hug, and blurts out thanks like she can't believe it, while Cruel just stands there, head spinning in stunned disbelief. Then he shifts his focus to Cruel, demanding she back Sue, and when Cruel locks eyes with that determined kid, she nods. She finally gets it, and she promises she'll protect Sue no matter what. With the roles locked in and the support secured, Haji whips around toward Fasigal in Syria. Sue still stuck to him, and demands her parents' final okay for their gut-wrenching, dangerous plan. Sue finally got her answer when her mom, Surya, beamed with pride and told everyone just how lucky they were to have such an amazing daughter, while her dad, Igil, looked grateful too, because Hagi had really come to ask for permission before moving forward. Sagol lovingly combed his wife's hair. Surya stared at their daughter with shining affection and told Sue they were counting on her, while Haiji and Cruel watched that tender scene, knowing their plan had just been fully approved. In the decoys set, the fight detonated across the plains. White wolf warriors slammed into the ravenous Ashu hounds like it was do or die. Haji suddenly shouted in panic, because the pack leader, a hulking monster with a presence that swallowed the air, finally stepped onto the battlefield. Far off, Igil's gaze locked onto it, his face tightening with unshakable resolve. A thunderous challenge ripped through the air as he swore he'd never forgive the beast for what it did. Then Igil surged forward with pure power, charging straight at the monstrous hound. Igil's valiant charge got crushed instantly. Overwhelming force slammed him aside. His body rocketed into a nearby tree with a brutal thud, and Sue and Surya screamed his name in pure horror. With its foe gone, the hound leader snapped its mouth open and blasted raw energy, and Haiji froze in stunned silence, then blurted out that the thing had just swatted away one of Cruel's arrows. They regrouped, staring down a beast that looked straight up unstoppable, and Haiji's stomach dropped at its unnatural strength. No doubt in his mind, it had to be a mutant. He spun to the dragon girl beside him and demanded the truth. "What kind of Cruel?" Carol shouts for her companion to hold up, then sizes up the beast in front of them. And when she realizes just how brutally strong it is, she steels herself. If things go south, she'll have to slip into her dragon form. He stays resolute as Cruel turns on him, snapping, "Why don't you trust your own strength more?" He whips his eyes back to that terrifying hound, then steels himself and announces, "I'll handle this." The beast plants its feet and refuses to budge. Its killing intent is so heavy it feels like you can asterisk touch it, prickling the air around you. He rockets upward midair, then smashes into a brutal dive, soaring right past the panic in his chest. He snaps his head up, eyes bulging, because the creature drops on him like a nightmare from the sky. He braces for impact and belts it out like his life depends on it. When the hound's roar hits, Maul's mouth gapes wide, and he unleashes a single scream of the word he swears is, "I believe," with. With a brutal upward slash, his blade split the beast clean in half, blasting a spray of blood high into the air. The crowd, Igal, Surya, Sue, and even Cruel, goes utterly silent, staring with faces frozen in total shock and disbelief. The massive Ashu hound leader sprawls defeated, jaws hanging open in one last silent snarl, and the whole tribe erupts in shocked cries across the clearing. Because Lord Haji just did the impossible. He killed the beast. With their leader down, the remaining Ashu hounds lose the fire in their legs and scramble back. Egil throws himself toward his father, eyes locked on them as they fade into the distance, and decides to cut them loose. He figures out the truth fast. Without their head, they're done. Surya nods right along, watching them spiral in panic, and agrees they don't pose a threat as. With the tribe finally taking control of the area, Haiji crumples from sheer exhaustion, ragged breath tearing out of him, a fresh slash on his cheek. Cruel rushes over, shouting his name in panic as he stumbles. That exhaustion gets tossed aside the second Sue sprints to him, her face glowing with pure admiration as she blurts out that he's incredible, so strong, and her voice shakes with awe at his unshaken, cool-headed way of fighting. He forces a small smile, and when the sky finally clears, Cruel turns to Haji and Sue and thanks them from the heart for their courage. That gratitude hits like a switch, and suddenly everything turns. Later on, the whole crew stands shoulder to shoulder in front of a village home, and then the shock lands. The terrifying Ashu hound leader is there too, now shrunken down to the size of a big wolf, just sitting calmly with the rest. With peace finally sealed, celebration erupts. Egil lifts his tankard and shouts a toast to crushing the Ashu hounds and to the fierce bravery his daughter, Sue, just proved. His words ignite the room, and everyone throws their mugs up high, shouting back in a huge, roaring cheer. The victory celebration explodes in full force. Women of the White Wolf tribe sing and dance, while Cruel, cheeks stuffed, happily devours several huge bread rolls in one go. AG jumps into the celebration, pouring drinks for the tribe, and then, watching with shock, He sees Sue climbing on top of a barrel, all fire and energy, serving her people like she owns the moment. With the joyous tri-members all around him, he bursts into a big, hearty laugh, getting swept up in the wave of cheer and pure relief. And then they all dig in, drink, and sing together. At the heart of the village, a massive bonfire roars against the night sky, and the White Wolf tribe's victory feast keeps raging for 3 solid days and nights. When the wild celebration finally dies down, a heavier moment crashes in. Haiji, Cruel, and Sustan line up before Iggle, Surya, and the other tribe elders, ready to take the lead. Eggle bowed so low his shoulders almost touched the ground, overflowing with the tribe's gratitude, and he thanked AG for everything, while AG, looking oddly humbled, admitted he only did a tiny bit of help. The tribe leader keeps talking, saying the tribe would have stayed trapped in terror of the Asu hounds if Haiji hadn't shown up. Then he hammers home that it's only because of Haiji that they can finally unite as one pack again, and Haiji just leans in, eyes sharp and expression deep, ready to reply. Just as his words hit the air, the whole White Wolf tribe, Gaul and Surya leading the charge, drops into a flawless synchronized bow. A silent, savage kind of respect and gratitude that chills the moment and cuts right through him. He and the whole White Wolf tribe drop their heads together in one powerful motion, pouring out pure gratitude, and they formally thank Lord Haji for everything he's done for them. He stands there without a sound, his face impossible to read. Then a soft breeze sweeps by, snatching away the little leaves like they never belonged there. A banner snaps and flutters through the air, and a crisp, formal announcement blasts the news that the hero is finally gone. His thoughts snap back to that instant, mounted up, ready to ride out, because he finally understood what he really was. Just a figurehead, a flashy decoration on a heroic cover, while the knights beside him were the ones who would actually swing steel. He stared down a row of faceless armored soldiers, and as he braced to hear why they were there, his resolve hardened into steel. The memory slips away and slams him back into the present. Then, with Sue and Cruel looming close, he waves off their thanks, telling them he's the one who should be grateful. He offers his hand like an open door, inviting them to drop by any time and toast again together in the future. Iggle snatches the handshake with a massive, real smile and jumps at the invitation on the spot, while right beside him, Surya lights up with pure joy as the bond finally clicks into place. His friendly words snap the Cruel one into a jarring realization. Her eyes go wide as that thought hits like a punch. Is Haiji gearing up to return to his own kind soon? Sue glances back at her parents, sadness flickering across her face, and then Iggle strides forward, telling Haiji that Sue chose to step into a terrifying warrior's role, and now the whole tribe stands behind her with open arms. Then the young girl snaps into focus, eyes dark with grit, as she declares she wants to learn every last thing from Haiji, so one day she'll be strong enough to protect everyone in the White Wolf tribe. With her goals locked in, she tilts her head up at her companions and says she wants to stick with Haiji and Cruel. Cruel breaks into a warm smile, and Haiji's face flashes with pure shock at how earnest she sounds. She belts out her choice with a bright, fearless cry, then shuts her eyes, smiling like pure joy just won. After Sue's determined cry, Haiji spins towards Sue's parents, admitting her choice could drag them into trouble. But before he even finishes, they all cut him off and wave it away like it's no big deal. He lays it out. This road is the one their daughter picked for herself. Then Surya quietly backs her up, saying all they can do now is trust and move forward, and Haiji just soaks it all in with a deep, thoughtful stare. With her parents' blessing ringing in their ears, it's finally time to leave. Haiji, Sue, and the Cruel wave tear themselves away from the gathered White Wolf tribe, who send them off with bright, hopeful cheers. And as they step into the wild, Haiji and Sue link hands, forging a brand new bond that feels like destiny. In the massive throne room of Ural, King Veiled III sits high on his throne while his minister stands close by. And across the room, the armored hero from Duquesne holds her ground, her voice cracking through the air as she admits they've been beaten again. The king's face twists with raw frustration. He's insisting that Hiro Kani's special move, Guardian of the Wind Asterisk, should have made her unbeatable compared to every Hiro before her. And standing right beside him, the other Hiro Asterisk Haiji Asterisk with Asterisk Grimaces Asterisk Asterisk nods along, but they already know the harsh truth that stings. He slams his armored head to the polished floor in a desperate bow, shouting at the top of his lungs, furious, demanding to know why they got crushed even after all that power. While the king can only stare, stunned and briefly struck silent by the raw pain on display. Right in the middle of Lamence's failure, Kanna's voice slices through the tension. She meets everyone's eyes and flat out says the soldiers aren't the ones to blame for the loss. She sinks to her knees beside Haiji, keeps pushing her plea, saying she doesn't care what punishment hits her, as long as the king refuses to pin the blame on the soldiers. She drops her head low and demands her audience with the king, and the moment the words land, His Majesty strokes his beard and weighs every syllable, so she insists that's everything she wants to say. Then Kane steps in and hits her with the truth. The crushing defeat is on her and only her. The declaration hangs there like a thunderclap. Shock flashes across her face. Then her eyes harden as shadows swallow her expression, and she finally accepts she's a defeated general. Meanwhile, way out past the capital, the sun blazes over a forest trail, and the original hero wipes his brow, grilling, "Did Cruel get found yet?" Right beside him, Cruel and Sue comb the woods, and Sue leans in, convinced this has to be the spot. Watched Cruel, her horned companion, whip her net toward a tree trunk and shout that she'd found it. But when he followed her gaze, he spotted a huge honeycomb dripping right from the tree. Sue, the cat-eared girl, lit up and shouted that this honey was insanely sweet and totally her favorite, while Hoggy pointed at something else up on the branches, demanding what it was. A gigantic Hercules-like beetle chomped through honey, and the tension felt locked into that moment. He pointed out the strange similarity and said insects like these were everywhere in his old world, while Sue stared at it all, baffled, until Cruel stepped in and fired her up for what came next. Sue took that as her signal, sprinted forward with her net, and shouted for everyone to wait up, while Haiji, breathless and lagging behind, pleaded with her not to push too deep into the woods, warning that trouble could be lurking anywhere. His warning paid off instantly. When rustling snapped through the nearby bushes, a massive bear burst out, its head crowned in some weird, crown-like robe. He instantly knew the honey scent had lured it in, then his eyes snapped to the danger, Ragehorn, the crowned bear. The beast tore the air open with a ferocious roar. Just as the bear charged and slammed its huge clawed paw down, Sue and the others screamed in terror. Then the hit never landed, because the very next second a young woman with long dark hair popped up nearby, flicking a complex, glowing magical artifact to life. A blinding burst of power detonated from the device, slamming the crowned bear and launching it skyward like a rocket, straight through the air. And there, in full view, the savior stepped out in due can, gripping a blazing orb of light. Haiji froze in disbelief and shouted her name, and she grinned back, finally greeting him after all this time. Then warned him she wouldn't let him summon her just to toss her aside. Sue thrusts a cup at her with full-on excitement, and when Indu takes a sip, she instantly recognizes it as barley tea. She can't believe it's the first time she's tasted it since landing in this world. Huggy tells her cold barley tea is the perfect summer drink and offers to grab her a cup too. Then right beside him, the cruel woman snipes under her breath, slamming him as a lecher for charming yet another woman. And Sue, hearing every word, asks where she picked up a nasty name like that. Cruel straight up grills Haji about his women, and Haji shoots back that they're just his housemates. No more, no less. Then Can pivots to the Haji blacksmith shop, and he confirms that Cruel and Sue both pitch in to help him with the work. They drop into the home's rough, rustic interior, right into a plain little workshop built to get the job done, not to coddle anyone. Later, deep inside the forge, Haji leaned in and told Kanai, "This is where I work right now." He went on to say that fighting Cruel and Sue has somehow made blacksmithing feel like something he actually enjoys. Sure, the job still bites back with danger, but he can't help thanking the king for giving him the chance. But she stares him down, demanding to know how his second life ever started in a place like this. Then her face goes serious as she tells him she's got a ton of questions, because she wants him to teach her how to forward disorder. At the anvil, Cain slams that hammer down with shocking force, and a blinding flash erupts like a spark from fate, while Haiji just stares, stunned, unable to figure out why she'd genuinely want to learn swordsmithing from him, sure she's masking her real feelings behind a perfectly crafted front. Cruel little jabs hit Kane, praising her excellent form like she's some hero, right beside Haji. And the second that compliment throws her off, Haji starts wrestling inside his head. Should he corner her about the real reason she came to him? Hain kicked off her training in the forge while Cruel barked out instructions, and after a few days of awkward tension, she finally clicked. She bonded with both Cruel and Sue until she felt like she'd always belonged in their home. Cain, all smiles, leaned in and asked Haiji what kind of rice ball he wanted today. Haiji muttered that it didn't matter, but Sue lit up and demanded one packed with wild veggies. Cain then teased Haiji like, "Yeah, you still don't get it, huh?" A few days later, her hard work finally paid off. She forged a blade to completion. Standing before Haiji, Sue, and Cruel, Ken raised that gleaming sword high, and with her voice brimming with victory, she announced, "It's done." He locked eyes on the weapon, and Cruel confirmed the truth. Sure, she'd helped a bit, but that sword was unmistakably Canny's work. Haiji stared at the craftsmanship, still trying to wrap his head around it, wondering if Canny really forged the whole thing herself. He snatched up the rapier, heart hammering, an insane win for an amateur, and he couldn't shake the nagging thought that his forge's weird effects might have helped. Then he wheeled on Canny and demanded to know why she'd picked a rapier in the first place. Before she could even get the words out, he threw out a wild proposal. He wanted them to have a match right then, and plain as day he said he'd fight her, leaving Canny frozen in stunned disbelief as his demand echoed. He thrust the rapier forward, bracing for a fight, and when Canny tightened her grip on the sword she'd just forged, a bizarre picture started to bloom in her thoughts. That sudden shock of a challenge froze Sue and Cruel where they stood, both staring from the sidelines with wide, disbelief-filled eyes. She's caught off guard, cheeks burning, stammering as Haiji corners her with relentless questions, while Cruel and Sue stand back and watch the whole showdown play out in the training yard. With steel in her eyes, she declares she'll test the sword herself. She's strong enough to stand on her own, and Haiji just won't buy it. He can't picture her matching him, and he presses, demanding to know why she'd even bother. His question makes her freeze, and suddenly his suspicion clicks into place, because the sword she forged is stamped with Haiji's name. He points it out on the spot, stunned that she's testing a weapon she just made for someone else. Then his whole vibe flips. He throws his hands up like it's nothing and agrees to her terms on the spot. A wager follows. If she can land even one hit on him, he'll grant whatever she wants. She shoots back a confident smile and accepts the deal without hesitation. The cheerful vibe dies instantly when his face hardens again. He demands the truth and says he can't trust her as long as she keeps things from him. To hammer his point home, he whips out a long katana, its polished blade blazing in the light, and then he demands she teach him exactly what she's been hiding. Can snaps her newly forged rapier free with a sharp ring of steel, then squares up across from her opponent. Both locked in, weapons up, and the duel's about to explode into motion. The clash ignites in a blink. Haiji storms forward, but Canny slips aside and fires off a surprise counter, hurling a tiny, glowing orb like a trap. Haiji's eyes snap wide with shock at the audacity, while Krull watches, stunned, as it's clear Canny isn't just surviving, she's fighting back. Then Canny declares she's done retreating. She slammed Haiji's question aside, screaming it didn't matter as she lunged, not at him, but straight at the Cruel one. And that brutal, sudden charge threw both Haiji and the dragon girl into total shock. Her blade slammed forward with a blinding flash, metal shards exploding through the air and blasting Haiji clean off his feet. Canny just stared, realization hitting her like a wave. He snapped up to his feet, staring down at the shattered sword on the ground, and the look in his eyes said it all. Her aim was off because she'd rushed everything out of pure immaturity. Her forging and her strike were both sloppy, and he was sure that if she'd actually poured her heart into it, the blade would never have split. He inched toward her, pressing hard for answers. What had captured her so completely that she'd start acting this recklessly? His face snapped into shock when he saw her clutch the broken hilt, and when she looked up at him, her voice shook as she launched into a desperate plea. Tears poured off her cheeks as she sobbed his name, begging him to save her master, Belphibia. She finally spilled the truth. The danger came from a demon holding her master captive, like it had everything it wanted. Inside the throne room, King Veiled III squares up with the armored hero, Canny, and cold fury hardens his face as he hammers that her dream of rescuing Belphibia is unforgivable, leaving Canny stunned, only managing to blurt, "Why?" From far away, you can spot Master Swordwoman Belphibia standing all by herself, still, sharp, and ready. The king tells you she's the legendary swordwoman of Purple Lightning, the one who's pulled countless soldiers out of death in battle after battle. And then he asks why anyone would just throw away someone this meritorious. He keeps going, and even though Belphibia is a beast with the blade, he bluntly reminds everyone she doesn't have the hero's special gift. Then he turns to Canny and demands, "Do you really think we should toss the warrior aside just for that?" The king lays out their grim situation to her, reminding her the kingdom has already bled out too many soldiers in past wars. And then he pushes the point hard. If her presence is the only shield left, then that's the road they have to take, even if it means someone must pay the ultimate price. Then the royal minister snaps that a rescue mission would just spill even more soldiers' blood. But Canny won't back down as the demon lord's forces crush closer, because they don't have the strength to save Belphibia. With a cold, grim resolve, she vows, "If nobody else will do it, I'm going to bring her back alone." Canny's defiant declaration crashes into stunned silence from the king and his minister. She whips her eyes back at them, reeling at their obvious disapproval. King's face tightens as he jabs a finger at her, snapping that she's not stepping out alone. Because a real hero can't be thrown into battle without a solid plan. He orders her to rein in her rage, keep her head clear. And then the royal minister slides in with a cold grin, saying they'll seize every last weapon in her possession. The minister's smile stretches too wide, and he looks the hero up and down like she's beneath him, then tells her to rest easy, but the way he says it screams that she's officially their prisoner. A calm, heavy certainty drifted over the far snow-capped peaks, like the world finally admitted, yeah, this is how it all ended up. Later on, Haiji and Canny pushed through a thick, shadowy forest in heavy cloaks that swallowed their shapes whole. He snapped his head toward her, raw frustration spilling out as he demanded why she hadn't told him everything from the very beginning. Canny shook her head and admitted she never meant to wreck the life he was finally living. Her mind slipped back to that moment she'd watched him, smiling like the world was safe, until everything cracked when she saw a monstrous bear tearing into him, and she couldn't do anything but chase after him. Turning to the moment, she demanded to know if he was really okay with where they were headed, and he brushed it off. Who did she think they were to believe all this progress could mean nothing? But even with all his swagger, Ken couldn't hide it. She was still terrified. Her resolve burned hotter at the thought of Belfair, because he'd been the first to genuinely recognize Sesai Jink, and that meant she had no choice but to go rescue her. Their journey finally dumped them right on the edge of a dark, dread-soaked woodland. Ken said this was where the demon tribe's territory starts, and the forest itself felt like a warning. About 2 weeks earlier, she told me this land had already been soaked in a war between the Ural Kingdom and the demon tribe, and her intel swore there was a treasure buried here. A huge stash of mithril, or if we were lucky, late dormant beneath the Black Forest. It turns out the whole war ignited over who would seize those priceless deposits, Canna and Belfair's native demon tribe, or the humans pushing in from the outside. And the result was brutal. The kingdom got crushed, they all shattered into a retreat headed north. She strides through the forest with Haiji, grilling him about what happened to his hero's gear, then chimes in that her own weapons were seized the moment she got cast out. He shoots back with a grin, telling her skirt was just cruel and Sue's suggestion. Then her blush creeps in as she fidgets with her cloak, but he instantly reassures her it's totally fine. He swings the conversation straight into weapon talk, cracking open his katana just enough to show steel, and then he asks, "Was it really smart for me to borrow your sword?" Like he already knows the truth. "It'd be way better if you were the one holding it." He smiles at her and tells her not to worry, because he's got a secret weapon all his own. Canna stares at him, hooked by the curiosity. Then he urges them to move, saying Belfair will be freaking out. Just like that, the sky flips and a brutal downpour unleashes itself. Then, back at their lodgings, Cruel stands by the window, staring the storm down with pure worry on her face. With her back to the room, she keeps her eyes on the storm, whispering Haiji's name under her breath, almost daring the universe to answer if he's really okay. Her mind jumps straight to the moments before he left. Standing in front of the door, she demanded answers, blasting, "Why do you have to go?" And he only shrugged it off, saying he was going, then ordering her to stay put and keep watch. She laid out his own logic to him, admitting he was strong, then said, point blank, that's exactly why he couldn't face this alone. He had to keep her at his side to protect Sue, and his deep trust left her flustered, blushing hard as her cheeks heated up. She stood there with arms locked tight across her chest, tension written all over her face, right as Sue lunged forward, reaching out in pure concern. Sue lunged forward and wrapped the dragon girl in a tight, comforting hug, squeezing her close until the fear faded. And then she told Cruel, "It'll be okay." Cruel sank into the comfort, fully agreeing that Hoggy would come back. Then the two of them just stared out at the rain through the window, holding their breath while they waited. Meanwhile, deep in demon territory, Haiji and Canny pushed through a pitch-black forest. Then Canny screamed, "Get down, Haiji!" And panic hit her voice as he whipped around. Her warnings finally made sense. Something huge and clawed stepped into view, and one heavy foot slammed onto the force floor without a sound. Two hulking, horned beastmen burst from the shadows, torches blazing as they prowl the woods, their grim, unstoppable presence lighting up every dark corner. Crouched beside Haiji, Kane hissed that they'd stepped straight into demon territory and had better stay sharp, because her kind's hearing was razor-strong. Haiji nodded, but his face screamed that his mind was locked on something far beyond her warning. He leaned in, a sly little smile tugging at his lips as he pointed out just how close her face was, and Ken snapped into a full-on fluster, stunned by the audacity of his comment. Kane lunges in and clamps a finger to his lips with a sharp hiss, so his voice dies before it even starts, her eyes blazing with pure alarm. Right nearby, The beastmen scouts they spotted earlier stand stiff and ready, one gripping a crude torch that slices through the darkness. The beastmen weren't as small as they looked. Turns out the troop was massive, glowing eyes blazing as they sweep the forest around them, dead set on violence. Hiding out of sight, Kan keeps yanking her hair and whispering that a demon army is closing in, while Haiji, soaked in sweat, admits his own fear. They're hunting for Belle. Right then, their eyes lock onto a procession inside the beastmen. These massive brutes haul an ornate palanquin on their shoulders, clearly meaning they're transporting someone of terrifying importance. A horned beastman with long, pale hair sneers at the girl being handed to their lord, calling her lucky, like she should have already perished out in the wild. Inside the palanquin, a lone figure in a white kimono just sits there, silent as a secret. AG stares at the chaos, utterly baffled, while Kanna hears every beastman word and quietly keeps echoing the word, Lord, like it's something they can't ignore. With a bone-jarring thud, the beastmen slammed the palanquin onto the force floor, and inside it, the passenger didn't move at all, hands folded neatly, calm as the curtains finally drifted shut. The beastman leader's head snaps toward them like a trap closing. His senses screamed them out. He bellows, "WHOS there?" And Haiji's eyes flare wide not from panic but from sudden recognition. He gasps the captive's name in shock, Belsen B. He stood there frozen solid, while the beastman leader smiled about what they found. Then he chuckled as he realized Kane was still rattled and furious. He snapped to his senses, snatched Kane, and roared that they had to flee right now, because if they got caught, rescue would vanish for good. Kane froze, then demanded what they were supposed to do about their master. With a fierce grin, she vowed that they'd fly, and snapped at him to keep his mouth shut before he could bite his own tongue. The next second, she hurled him into the air, and he blurted out a terrified, startled scream. They crashed to the ground in a burst of light, safely away from the mountains, right after they made their escape. The moment they were finally safe, Ken lowered her head in pure gratitude, then turned to Haiji and admitted the truth. Without him, she would have charged in blind and wrecked everything. Still reeling from that sudden escape, he could only choke out a trembling request, "Tell me next time." Because he wasn't exaggerating, that whole ordeal genuinely scared him senseless. He said this was his first time watching her unique skill, the Guardian of the Wind, and he couldn't believe what he was seeing, calling it incredible, then nodded that they were finally even, because without her, he'd have been boxed in by the demon that almost struck. Meanwhile, far off, the Beastman leader stayed stone still, replaying the orders he'd been given. Humans would be offered up as sacrifices, and anyone who fought back would be wiped out without a second thought. The word sacrifice hit him like a punch, and cold dread curled in his stomach. Could it really mean they'd turn this plan on him, slipping into the enemy's position unseen? With grim determination, he jabs a finger forward and locks in their objective. Then Can beside him confirms it with a calm certainty. They've reached the exact destination they were aiming for. Ahead of them, tucked deep inside a brutal mountain range, stands a magnificent city, its towers glowing with a supernatural light that spills down from the sky above. They sprint through the city streets, cloaks snapping in the wind as they charge toward the towering central structure. Right as a lone beastman guard stands there, staring ahead like he hasn't got a clue they're sneaking in. They slip into the grand building and creep down a long corridor, holding their breath. Then they peek through an open doorway and spot their target, a high-ranking elven woman sitting alone by a window. Elsewhere in the stronghold, the beastmen are tearing it up in the Great Hall, howling, carousing, and stuffing themselves, with nothing on their minds but food and drink. The elven woman, totally oblivious to the watchers, releases a heavy, exhausted sigh, and her face turns dark with sorrow. She can't stop wondering how everything spiraled to this, until her quiet thoughts get ripped apart when Haiji and Kanai step through the doorway, his boot thudding on the stone floor like a warning. The elf matriarch snaps in shock, shouting Kana and Haiji Dono's names and demanding to know why they're here. Then Haiji steps up and says it like it's obvious. "We came to rescue you," and he adds, breathless with relief, "I'm just glad you're safe, Belfair's master." Hannah rockets forward and clamps onto the elven woman tight, right as the elf matriarch is left stunned by that sudden closeness, only to blur out if they even understand where they've ended up, the domain of the demon trash. She confesses, voice cracking, that as a hero from another world she has almost nobody she can truly trust. And with tears streaming, she pleads with the woman not to leave her disciple behind and wander off by herself. Behind them, Haiji silently watches the whole heartbreak unfold. The elf matriarch's stern face melts into a warm smile as she strokes Canny's hair, whispering that this is a real bind. Because for now, Canny has to be left on her own. AG strides up and thanks the matriarch for sparing Kanai's emotional outburst, then admits he's felt the exact same way. He demands they bolt right now, because they're running out of time before she's dragged into a sacrifice, and he even calls her master straight to her face. Her face twists into total confusion. She keeps repeating sacrifice, but the word just won't click like it means nothing to her. Suddenly, a crushing presence slams into the room. An imposing figure in formal clothes steps into view, his feet shifting from human to clawed, beastly shapes on the floor. He glares down, voice oozing pure menace, and barks that only a fool would dare trespass in his hall. Staring down the hulking figure, Haiji snaps to the truth. This isn't a normal fighter at all. It's a demon, a giant beast man named Lord Smirks, towering over him and demanding why a mere human dares walk his lands, just as Haiji clenches a monstrous fist in an angry buildup. Right as he drops in from the sky, he slams the stone floor with total cataclysmic force. Cracks rip through the ground. It explodes into a million shards, and a brutal shockwave detonates through the chamber, knocking everyone sideways. As the dust starts to drift, Ken yells for Haji to back up. Now, snatching a chunk of rubble in his fist while his face screams disbelief at the sheer force that tore the floor apart. The beast man just sneers, taunting him like, "So you really dodged it." Eyes blown wide with pure alarm as the world wobbles around them, Haiji bursts out screaming for Belle and Kanai to get behind him. Now, before danger closes in. Kanai heeds the warning and slams the elf matriarch out of the way, just as a huge chunk of the ceiling comes crashing down. Watches as the elf matriarch gets slammed to the ground, rubble exploding around her, while the beast man lord looms over him like nothing's wrong. Then the structure crumbles again right nearby. The matriarch tries to swear she's fine, but her words falter, her confidence leaking out mid-sentence. His eyes snap to Kanai, down on the ground, wounded. Yet she still forces herself to kneel there, waving off her own pain and begging Haiji to flee with her master, and all he can do is stare, crying out her name in shock as horror grips him. Before Haiji can even move, the beast man lord crushes the space between them, towering over them both. Then roars that they're going nowhere, their run ending right here as the truth lands like a hammer, and Haiji clenches his teeth, rage surging but no chance to fight. Staring down the towering menace, Haiji calmly tells the elf matriarch and the wounded Kanai to hold their ground and admits they've got it all wrong. Then he turns to her, locks eyes, and swears he'll protect her no matter what. Kanai jolts at the declaration, gasping as she calls out his name from where she's sprawled, hurt. And the elf matriarch freezes even harder, eyes bulging, blush flaring as his promise of protection hits. She snaps back into focus, a fierce smile locking in as she hands over both her life and her master's dam, and right then Haiji's face hardens. His grip cinches down on his katana's hilt. He thrusts the blade forward, and right at the tip a razor-bright glow starts to flicker to life. While behind him, Kanai's voice snaps in, begging him to look at what's coming. The Beastman Lord stands over the shattered ground, staring with zero respect. Then he snaps, asks if their talk is done, and orders the human to get out of Belphibia because taking him on is impossible. He drops a chilling ultimatum. If Hagi won't leave, I'll just kill him here. The hero doesn't flinch, sword raised, face set, and his resolve still ironclad. Boldly, Hagi blurts his name, and the Beastman Lord Albic smirks back, claiming he's the master of this domain. Albic hurls down a challenge. If Haiji loses, he'll have to atone for the disgrace of wrecking their sacred ceremony. But if he wins, Albic lets him walk out with both the matriarch and the Kanai. Once the terms are locked in, Albic steps up and formally calls the brave one to a duel. He stands poised for the duel, hood up, cloak snapping over his armor, katana hanging at his side with its tip skimming the cracked, shattered ground as he locks eyes with his opponent. Beastman Lord Albic flashes a predatory grin and rockets forward, massive cleaver sword raised overhead. HG's eyes blow wide, sweat beads up, and he braces for the assault that hits impossibly fast with. With a deafening clang, that colossal blade comes crashing down. Hagi barely snaps his katana up in time, sparks exploding in the air as steel meets steel, and the moment he feels that brutal difference in raw strength, his teeth lock tight. With pressure crushing him, Albic leans in and taunts him, saying he's going to test the hero's limits. So Haiji snaps back with a shout and dares the beast man, Lord of Brown. From the sidelines, the elf matriarch stares with a grim face, clocking the brutal power gap, and she's already sure Haji's defeat is coming if this keeps up. Albic keeps sneering, slams his blade in the way, and taunts, "What a fine sword, such a shame it's in the hands of its current wielder." Hannah clocks it fast. Her eyes lock on the duel, and the truth hits like lightning. She recognizes his moves, realizing he's baiting Albec's attacks the same way she did in her own fight. The elf matriarch swivels toward her, worry spilling out. "Kane," she starts. But Kane stays calm, telling her plainly that their master is totally fine. The matriarch still isn't buying it. She says Haji's weapon looks deadly, but his handling feels rough for a human. Then she scoffs like, with a blade that's strong, he ought to slice through anything. And right as she talks, the fight explodes again as both combatants keep clashing, steel hammering steel in a furious showdown. He's caught off guard. His sword erupts out of his grip and spins into the sky in a blink, while Can from the sidelines spots the alarm and realizes his blade was repelled. With his opponent's weapon ripped away, the Beastman Lord looms over Albec, his massive blade hanging in the air. Then Albec snarls and swears this is already his win, right in his grip. He slams the weapon down with bone-crushing force, shattering the stone beneath him. Yet Haiji just flings himself aside at the last second, barely dodging the lethal impact. As Kane crashes to the ground, he yells his name with pure worry. Meanwhile, Haiji grits through the pain and scrambles for the little object at his hip, his face burning with fierce determination. He doesn't pull out a sword at all. He yanks a tiny little knife instead, and the Beastman Lord just stares, baffled, like, what's he even trying to do with that? A blade flashes with an unexpected glint, because this isn't just any knife. It's a secret S-rank kitchen weapon forged by Hoggy himself. Clutching that unassuming weapon, he fires off a question to Albec. Do you still want a fight? The Beastman Lord freezes, staring in shock at this sudden twist. At last, the crowd gets it. Kane snaps the truth into place. That kitchen knife was his secret weapon all along. Albert throws up his hands and admits defeat, vowing he'll still follow their agreement by taking his bride. And Haiji. He can only freeze in total confusion, staring like, wait, who in the world is this balsam bride? He stood there, completely stunned, while Beastman Lord Albec fixed his eyes on the elf matriarch and said that the duel was started for one reason only, to marry Belle. The matriarch's cheeks ignited a brutal shade of red, her gaze darting away in pure embarrassment, and a tiny heart flashed in her pupil. Then the truth hit Haji like a sucker punch, and he just blurted, marriage. In the pitch-black silence, an eye jerks open like it just woke up from a nightmare. Consciousness snaps back to Belfair, the elf swordswoman, only to find herself sprawled in a strange bed, her body cinched tight in bandages. A huge horned beast man, Albec, barrels to her side, panic and relief wrestling in his face. You're awake, he blurts. Belfair tries to tell him what happened, how she was trapped in the Black Forest and got torn away from her companions. He urges her to calm down, reminding her she's still in agony. And right on cue, she grimaces and grabs her wounds like she can't ignore the pain. Albi leans into the elf matriarch and grills her. Does he really need some big reason for what he does? She just tilts her head and asks, where are we going? He then strides up to his roaring band of warriors and tells them straight up. The Mazoku loves strength, and he's convinced the humans already know about that brutal assault. His mind snaps back to that battle, seeing the hero slash through his subordinates with brutal, unmatched swordwork, standing as the last wall between his escaping comrades and total destruction. And Albuck can't help admiring the grit, even though it costs his own men their lives. An elderly, goblin-like attendant slips into Belfair's room and with a calm voice tells her that not a single soul who dare hurt their master is anywhere near. Then urges her to stop fighting herself and finally rest and heal. I swear the elf matriarch sits there, stone-calm beside Albec. Then she drops the truth with zero drama. If he hadn't shown up, she would have been dead in the Black Forest. Haiji and Canny look wrecked with worry, and then it hits Haiji like a punch to the gut. This Albec Mizoku is their master's benefactor, the same guy he just had his blade drawn against, and Canny can only gasp in agreement because she'd literally called him an evil spirit, her face drained of color as panic takes over. Shame hit them hard as both of them bowed low in a brutal apology to the Beastman Lord. Alb Ike, lounging at the head of that long table, flicked them off with a dismissive wave, telling them it's truly fine because he gets why they'd want to protect their comrades. That forgiveness barely even lands on calm Canna. He snaps upright like he's been yanked by a string and demands to know why he's marrying her master, while the elf matriarch just calmly sips her drink with a smug little smile. Albec cuts in that he won their duel, so it's over, settled. Then the story snaps back to where it all began. After Belfair finally healed up, she marched in and challenged Albec to the duel herself, and he remembers just how terrifyingly hard she fought, throwing everything into the fight. Two combatants squared off, eyes locked with razor-sharp focus, until the moment of impact finally slammed the air. Belfair lunged with a silver blur of steel, but the duel ended the instant her blade snapped, Albik struck first, and her sword shattered to pieces, sealing the fight, while he muttered that this was a Mazoku-style duel, a concept the heroes had never even heard of. Shocked into silence, Haiji and Kanai can only stare as Albert keeps talking, saying that in Mazoka tradition, a woman who's beaten by a stronger man has to become his mate, and admitting he never once thought he'd ever meet someone stronger than himself. AG shoots up from the ground, arguing that he's a man and he can't marry Albuk, but the Beastman Lord just laughs and says he wants strong women. Then the elf matriarch glides in, her robe slipping back to show her bare back, and cool as ice she declares, "That's exactly why I'm the one who can be your maid," leaving her two pupils completely wrecked. AG sweats, fists clenched, and demands to know why humans and Mizoku are at war. Albik, the Beastman Lord, just sprawls there and shrugs, saying, "I don't know," then orders the hero to go home because they're gearing up to intercept his people. Hain slams Albik with a question, "Why do you hate humans if you don't even care about this war?" And Albik coldly answers, "The Mizoku are a pure race, nothing like the kingdom, which is blended from different species, and they have zero plans to conquer human lands. But if the right chance opens up, they'll grab the good territory without hesitation." He keeps watching, and then it clicks. Sure, humans used to be a real problem, but their new gear is shockingly flimsy. Albuk flicks his hand like it's nothing, smirks, and says, "We love a good fight, but right now we're busy gearing up for the Great Demon Festival." He whips around to Kanai, worry carving deep lines into his face, and blurts out, "How are they supposed to be adversaries when the Mizoku treat them like it's nothing at all?" After a beat of deep thought, it finally clicks for him. He swallows his pride and rushes out an apology for that earlier outburst. He turns to Albuk and asks if there's anything he can do to help, and the Beastman Lord stares back, caught off guard, before snapping that the hero is way too naive. Right nearby, the elf matriarch knocks back a whole bottle of wine, and Albuk's like, "Wait, I thought humans would be way more cunning." Then he spots it. Just like Belfair, his new fiancée is packed with a pure good heart. Mid-sip, she casually drops the bomb. She's not just any elf, she's a dark elf. Then the Beastman Lord snaps his focus back to Haji and drops a weird request. He wants a knife, but not a sharp one. A regular blade is too risky for him. He needs something blunt instead. And Haji just stares, totally baffled as he tries to make sense of it. Beastman Lord just lifted his open palm and tossed out a new number, 500, and the whole scene hit Haji like a punch to the gut. He stared in pure disbelief, stammered it back, and kept asking himself if he'd really heard right. The Beastman Lord leaned in and laid out his offer, saying the Mizoku could forge advanced metal and even craft swords soaked in magic. Then he admitted he'd heard about the brutal history between humans and his people, and he was done with that, offering instead to build a real trade relationship. Then he straight up clarified it. The Mizoku usually refuse humans, but Haiji is different. And with a sharp point at him, Albuk declared, "You can trust him. He's the exception." Leaning forward, Albuk formally demanded to know if Haji would take the deal, because he made it clear they'd already tried trading with other nations, all just to keep his own people in mind. After a beat, Hog's face hardened with resolve, and he gave the nod, consent. At least Albai confirmed Haji was in. Then the deal sealed, the Beastman Lord slammed his armored grip onto Haji's hands with full force. After a while, Haji Kan and Belfair stood shoulder to shoulder out in the open field, their silhouettes faintly glowing as they stared down a distant line of snow-capped mountains. Shellfair fired off the plan to her companions. "We're heading back to the royal palace first." Kanai snapped her gaze toward her, worried sick, and asked if her apprentice would feel alone without her. She bowed so deeply it felt like thanks carved into her bones, and her gratitude hit like something she'd never be able to repay. Haiji just met her smile with warmth, telling her they were from the same homeland, so if trouble ever found her, she should never hesitate to call. She pumped his hand hard and said yes with fire in her eyes, while Bell just watched with that deadpan stare, and Haiji couldn't help thinking that his master and Canny had finally gotten pretty close. His thoughts got yanked to a stop when both women grabbed his arms. Haiji froze, completely stunned, as Can snapped, demanding to hear when he decided she'd be his life partner, while Bell stayed calm and asked him to confirm, right there, that she was truly the one he'd chosen. He stayed locked in shock as Bell told him she and Hoggy had promised to stick together as a pair, even without a formal contract. Then both women traded razor-sharp stares while the stunned hero stood there, speechless. The argument flared up fast. Bell snapped at Kane for disrespecting the master, and Kane fired back that Bell was the one who pushed Haiji into that promise after their duel. Then they both agreed to let Haiji decide, and they turned to him with eyes on the answer. They tracked him down and realized he'd already vanished. Two women froze, staring at the empty air, while his voice carried through the distance calling their names as he slipped away. He sprinted through the forest at blinding speed, carving out every last inch of space between him and the argument. He whipped his head over his shoulder, relief flooding his face, sure he could finally reach his destination without anything else going wrong. He tilts his gaze and watches Cruel whirl around her dragon form. Then, bam, his eyes lock onto her human shape as Sue comes sprinting toward him, yelling in pure joy. He blurts out Cruel's name, and you can hear the shock in his voice. In the very next second, a crushing embrace snaps shut. Sue and Cruel crash into him together, their arms cinching tightly around his back. Their faces pressed into him, eyes squeezed shut with relief. Sue couldn't stop herself from saying how thrilled she was that he'd come back, and that bittersweet warmth echoed through the room as they welcomed him home. He stays stiff in their embrace, eyes stretched wide with pure confusion as he stammers, unable to make sense of what's happening. The three of them stand shoulder to shoulder in the grassy field, and for a breath the whole reunion goes quiet beneath the wide open sky. As the hours slip by, night drops in, and the whole scene glides to a quiet wooden house, tucked under a sky exploding with stars. The next morning, Hoggy jolts awake in a bed, stretches hard, and blurts, "Is it really morning?" Then a young guy pops into the doorway, grinning at him and telling him, bright as day, that something cruel is coming. His words snap Haiji's face into pure shock. Then the young man keeps going, grinning as he says he already fed the furnace and hammered out multiple items, and all Haiji can do is stammer, completely lost, begging for sense of what's going on. His confusion only got worse when a face he knew all too well stepped into view, and he blurted out her name like he couldn't believe his eyes. Kana was really there, gripping a blacksmith's hammer and grinning like crazy, telling him she'd chosen to study smithing right at this place. With her eyes closed and a soft smile, she revealed she'd stepped away from being a hero. Then she leaned in, asking him for his guidance and support as she chased this new dream. After everything that just went down, Indukini officially slid into Haiji's little crew, with Cruel and Sue right there to welcome it into their growing household. As the new members stepped in, everyone swung into action and started building an extension onto the house for her. While Heiji worked, his mind kept snapping back to the capital, where King Veiled III fretted over whether the kingdom would even survive without a tyro, Kana. Still, with all three of them teamed up, that new room got finished in a blink. Even after they got the job done, Hoggy stared at the finished work with a tense, troubled look, like unease refused to leave his mind. The air felt wrong, and Ken noticed the second she stepped in. She asked what had happened, with Cruel and Sue right beside her, all of them worried sick. Then Haiji whipped around and tried to brush it off, insisting it was nothing. Cruel wouldn't let him dodge it. He shoved the truth out of him and demanded what he meant. Haiji finally admitted it was nothing, then tried to spin it anyway, swearing their food supplies were completely fine. His attempt to dodge the blame crumbled instantly. Haiji whipped around to face them, jaw tight, and snapped that the real problem was the tamagain, the special steel he swears by. Canny, totally lost, begged, "Wait, what's going on with it?" Finally, the real reason for his worry clicked. He'd run out of it entirely. Cruel shot back, just briefly baffled, thinking she was talking about rice until Hoggy corrected her. Then he laid it out. Tamahagin is the one essential metal you need to forge a truly great blade. She lifted a rough, dark lump and pointed it out like it mattered. Steel harder than iron with barely any impurities, the kind that won't snap. Then grinned, bragging that Tamahagin forges like a dream because it welds easily when it's heated, letting iron cling together under a hammer. And that's exactly why Japanese swords are made from it. The moment a hammer cracked and glowing metal rang on the anvil, she practically begged Haiji to teach her more. The forging of Tamahagin is a one-of-a-kind Japanese method, Tatara ironworking, that the hero before you brought into this world. Mid-bite, with all that cruelty hanging in the air, they blurted the real question. What on earth would they do without any Tamahagin? And Indukana immediately pressed her senior, asking if an A-rank knife would still fall short. He broke it down. They wanted a knife for Albec, a demon tribe member, and when Haiji remembered being asked for the same level as his own work, he didn't dodge the truth. Without the right material, he couldn't forge an S-rank blade, not a chance. At that exact moment, the workshop's master craftsman snapped in and said Albec had caused him all kinds of trouble, and he was still going to carry out his request. Then he softly patted Cruel's head, and Cruel blurted out her doubts about Albec, remembering Belfair swore he was a good person. The craftsman's face darkened the moment he confirmed their trouble, telling them Tamahagin wasn't something you could just grab. Cruel didn't blink and shot back. Is it more vibrant and shinier than regular steel? He insisted this wasn't something you could just whip up, and he swore no one would find it anywhere outside his own forge. Then a hard little jolt of realization hit him, and cruelly, she spun around and pointed at a nearby door, saying she might have exactly what he needed stashed in her private treasury. With a confident grin, she claimed her collection could be exactly what they needed, leaving Haiji, Sue, and Canny staring, breath held, waiting for the answer. Moments later, Cruel ripped through the sky in her true dragon form, snatching an ecstatic Can and Sue onto her back, while Can gasped that this was her very first dragon ride. Down below, Haji stared as they shot upward, shouting a warning to not let excitement get the best of them. Cruel, the great white dragon, rockets toward a giant forest-covered mountain, one with a cave carved right into its face, and mid-flight she grumbles that things would be fine if Hoggy would stop needling her. Then Can snaps at her from the saddle. Her reckless flying is flat-out unacceptable, and the suit throws in an emphatic, "Nope, absolutely not." They spill out right at the mouth of that massive cave, and Haiji leans into the darkness, asking if her treasure is truly in there. With Cruel now in a humanoid body and a huge club-like torch in hand, she grins and says yes, then snaps, "Come on, follow me." She ushers them into the cavern, snaps her fingers, and the torch in her hand erupts to life, bathing the damp stone walls in a flickering glow and lighting the way for Haiji, Kanai, Sue, and the master craftsman. As they push deeper, the canning companion darts out, asking nervously if Haji thinks traps might be waiting for them, especially near a treasury. Haji admits it could happen. Then Cruel hears the talk, laughs it off, and snaps. Why would she plant traps in her own home? Her casual brush-off leaves him rattled, staring blankly as he can't even string a sentence together. Then Kanna leans in, asks what weird thoughts just hit him, and deadpans that at least there aren't any mice around. Her words snap him out of autopilot. He whips his gaze around the cavern, checks every corner, and a cold dread creeps in when he realizes there's not a single trace of life anywhere. He swallows hard and knows it's real now. The rumors about Dragon's Hoard are true. Feeling his worry, Cruel flashes a bright smile and says, "Don't stress. My scent soaks this cave and scares off both animals and most people." Hoggy catches that smell in the air, clamps a hand over his nose, and realizes just how terrifying her aura really is. As they press deeper, Cruel slams to a stop and proudly declares they've finally reached her treasury. The cavern bursts open into a huge chamber packed with glittering piles of gold, jewels, and priceless artifacts. Haji warns that if they so much as damage a single thing, they'll be stuck paying it off for the rest of their lives, and Ken just stares in stunned silence while Sue's eyes light up as she blurts out how unbelievably shiny everything is. She stared at those mountains of gold and glittering jewels, snapping, "How did you even pull this off?" Then she leaned in and admitted it. Most of it was handed to her by humans. Every once in a while, strange, non-human visitors would doze off in her sacred realm, and she'd quietly heap treasures onto them right before they left, because that was her way of saying thank you. Hearing that, Kane blurted out, "So, are there offerings?" And Cruel snapped her head to the side, utterly clueless. Now that she'd become a walking armor-clad miracle, people basically treated her like a living god. But right then, Cruel studied Kane and shrugged in her mind, thinking she just looked like a normal, sweet little girl with no special power at all. He kept staring at the hoard's massive scale, and the thought hit him hard. This world might treat a holy dragon like it's practically a god, because all he could see was a monstrous, merciless, draconic giant looming in his mind, sealing the idea in place. As all this churned in his head, Kanai snatched an ornate black mask from the treasure pile, an owl staring back at her. She asked if that motif was really an owl, and he snapped, warning her not to go grabbing valuables so recklessly. Suddenly, a thin, ghostly voice echoed through the cavern, "I love you," and the armored hero spun around, stunned, barking for answers like, "What was that?" Cruel instantly clocked Sue, and when Sue nodded, Kin froze in place, face blazing red, as she clutched the mask and blurted out the words again, "I love you." With a finger pointed in accusation, Cruel snapped that Kane was blushing and spiraling into panic, and swore the voice came from her too. Mortified, Kane stammered, denying it with shaking insistence. "It wasn't me." Sue stepped in like, "Nope, you've got it wrong." She snapped that the voice never came from Kanna, it was coming from the mask she was holding. While her buddies were still reeling from the cursed mask bombshell, Kane flashed a wink and decided she'd better handle it. Right now. She grinned, promised a quick check, then fired up her appraisal skill on the dark artifact. The appraisal didn't match what I expected at all. It landed on a wild, bird-shaped object, labeled a parent mask. It's a ranked D magical tool with one straightforward power. It repeats the words you've memorized, just like a parent repeating your lessons. That flood of magical loot made Haji snap and demand where it all came from. Then Cruel, clutching a stack of the exact same parrot masks, shrugged and admitted she had no clue because she only hoarded every offering people brought her in that place, and there was way more where it came from. He snatched one up and quizzed Cruel what it was, while Sue completely ignored that, fixated on a tiny stone statue Cruel was holding. Ken leaned in and called it adorable, and then Haji spun toward her, mask in hand, grilling her about her taste. His question snapped Kane into defense. She demanded if her sense of style was really that weird. But Cruel cut in with a brutal truth. The mask wasn't cute at all, and her face screamed pure disgust. While they argued, realization hit Haji like a punch. He knew that eerie voice earlier had to be coming from the black mask Canny was clutching, not the parrot ones. He shoved her to speak the password, but Canny's confusion spiraled into something cruel, and he snapped that she couldn't trust the parrot mask's trick. Sue suddenly yanked him out of his thoughts with a tiny, dog-like stone statue, insisting she heard something breathing out of it. And Haji, totally baffled, told her he had no clue, even as she waved the thing in his face with. Without a single word, she slammed the statue onto the ground, and it erupted like a cannon, blasting out a wall of light and force. Haji shrieked at Sue to run as he launched himself toward Shield Cruel, but the shockwave still tore through everything, flinging him, Sue, and Kanai through the air. She shoots up from the dust and wreckage like the explosion didn't even touch her, and Haji drops to his knees, panicking whether she's okay. She waves his worry away, swears she's fine, and points straight into the heart of the crater, telling him to look at what just appeared. As her hand flicks toward it, his gaze snaps to a brutal lion dog statue tearing itself out of the swirling smoke. Then, right as the stone fully forms, a terrifying force presses in from nowhere, its glowing eyes cutting through the dark while a deep voice crashes down, demanding a password. A stone guardian statue wrapped in blinding energy snaps to life. Its eyes ignite with wicked light, and its jagged stone teeth bare in a savage roar. With this sudden danger crashing down, Haji and his crew, Kane, Cruel, and Sue, huddle up, staring the animated beast down, hearts hammering with shock while grim resolve hardens on their faces. Not long after it hits Cruel like a punch, she blurts that she remembers the demon bee statue. It's got a password or it lashes out and attacks. Kanai All Business demands to know if she remembers it for real while Haji snaps her way, pushing, "Tell us, what's the answer?" What? She scratches her head like she's caught off guard, flashing a nervous smile as she admits she has zero memory of it. While behind her, Haji and Kanny slump in total frustration. No password to Comet, so the statue rockets forward and the whole crew stumbles back in pure panic. Haji clenches his teeth, knowing there's no escape now. They've got to fight. Then Kane steps up, eyes locked in, and declares she'll take the lead. She lunges and drives her sword straight for the creature's face. Then the statue snaps into motion so fast it's unreal, clamping down on the blade with brutal jaws in a thunderous clank. A sharp crack split the air, steel blade shattered against the statue's stone teeth, and Kanna, eyes hazy with disbelief, stared at the ruined weapon in shock. But as things turned desperate, a cruel look burned into something steely, and she decided that if it had really come to this, she had to move. A blur of motion, she vaults onto the Guardian's head and clamps its jaws shut with her bare hands, and Ken just stares, shocked she pulled it off. Then Cruel snaps into action, shouting that she'll take the beast on herself. She strains against the animated statue, screaming at her companions to run, then fixes a fierce grimace and vows she'll stall the creature while they get out. He watches, grim and tense, realizing he can't just ditch Cruel and charge the Guardian by himself. First, he has to figure out who owns that statue. The fight just smashes to a stop with a tiny, soft pop. Then the giant animated Guardian collapses back into its true form, a small, lifeless stone figurine that drops onto the ground and does nothing. Stunned the second it ends, she gasps, Cruel swings in, catching his breath too, and admits it was dangerously close. Then she blurts out the truth, the shout, "Leave it to me," was the password. And like a flashback slamming into her, she finally remembers she built that stone guardian all those years ago. Sue barrels in first, throws out an apology to Cruel, then immediately praises her guts and hard work, ending with a straight-up, "You're amazing." Smiling at the praise, she whips around to Haiji, practically begging him to sing her praises too, and he grins, thanking her while praising her hard work. But then Kane cuts in fast, snapping that it all started with Cruel's own mistake, because he'd forgotten about that dangerous creation in the first place. Then everyone's gaze snaps to a massive, glittering mound nearby. Haiji spots it as Tamagang's Great Hall, and the shock hits. Someone buried a stone statue right in the middle of the precious ore. Hannah breaks into a relieved smile and says, "Now we can finally forge the kitchen knife." Right next to her, Sue and Cruel erupt in celebration, and all their past troubles get wiped clean in an instant. Zai and the others hung back as Haiji spun around, wearing that serious look like he'd just solved something big. Then he told them that before they headed home, he had to craft one last thing, and Kanai, Sue, and Cruel just stared at him in total, stunned silence. After his big declaration, they ended up at a rough, rustic forge. While Hoggy watched, Cruel gripped a massive sledgehammer and hammered away at the blazing tamahagin with thunderous, perfectly timed swings. The hammer slammed down with a deafening clang, striking perfectly, and exploding into a blazing spray of sparks off the searing metal. He watched her work, jaw-dropping, and then the Cruel paused, like he was hinting that with something this massive, it's smarter to forge it than cast it. Hoggy nodded, knowing exactly what he meant. She leaned in and explained. Casting would have been easier, sure, but the thing they were trying to make demanded real power, the kind you only get by layering the iron and forging it until it's strong. Even though she knew the forging steps, she stared in total confusion as a ladle got set up, iron, sand, and charcoal filling it like a spark about to ignite. They heated the metal until it glowed, forcing the iron to tighten into shape. Then they kept folding and hammering it again and again until it became a killer composite, built to shrug off impacts with relentless strength. Once his plan clicked into place, they'd finish the item and smuggle it straight into Krull's personal treasury. She froze, mouth agape, utterly stunned, stammering, and unable to believe what she'd just heard. She stands at the mouth of her treasury, staring into a massive cavern carved straight into the face of an unforgiving cliff. A massive, steel-end reinforcement slab of a door slams shut the path forward, and Haiji Su and Kanny stare up at it, wide-eyed at its brutal size and the kind of strength it would take to tear through it. She's like, AG, are you serious? This door is way too glorious for that. And he fires back, yes, because it keeps anyone with bad intentions from stumbling in by mistake. He explains the door is built to shield everyone from the dangerous treasures locked away in the treasury. Then Su nuzzles his side and gushes that he's kind, even as Haiji insists it's way too soon for praise. Right after that, the whole crew lines up in front of a wall packed with bizarre, strange masks. That insect head mask radiates a heavy, dark aura you can practically feel in your chest. Hoggy demands their thoughts and admits he's shocked too. Sue's body shudders because it feels horribly terrifying and cruel, but she still just fixates on the mask, then reaches out, trying to figure out what's wrong with it. The moment her fingers hover near it, the mask erupts in a choking swirl of dark energy. She gasps, yanks her hand back, and recoils in pure shock. Sue clings to the trembling Cruel for comfort, while Hage explains he planted a trap on the mask to slam away anyone who dares to touch it. Now they have to pick a password for Cruel. Kan urges them to choose something simple to remember, and Cruel, regaining her nerve, declares that after what just happened, she'll never forget a single word he said. Sue shoots her hand up, and Kan grins, totally getting the plan. With her crew at her side, she watched the cruelty unfold while they all grinned and shouted the chosen password in perfect unison. Hey G, we love you. That declaration blindsided Haiji. He snapped around, eyes wide, and demanded, why are you using my name as the password? Sue swore she'd never forget it, cruel, yet smiling softly like she already knew the future. She promised that even after hundreds or thousands of years, the memory would still be there, and her certainty hit like a hammer. Haiji just stared back, frozen in a swirl of shock and pure disbelief. He snapped his head away and raked a hand through his hair, totally exasperated. Kanei caught it and with a teasing grin asked why he wouldn't look at them. Right nearby, the stone guardian statue suddenly flared with a gentle glow, its rigid face saying one thing loud and clear. This wasn't a password at all, it was a confession of love. The tension clung to the air, and Hoggy quickly looked away, sweating like crazy, a bead sliding down his temple. While Cruel-looking blushed and fumbled, Kanai pressed a hand over her mouth, fighting a grin, and said that whole exchange felt exactly like a confession.